Imagine yourself sitting in class, paying attention to the teacher, when suddenly the entire school collapses into a massive black hole, and you find yourself in a strange and terrifying place. This is today's Manhwa story, set in a world where black holes have begun to appear everywhere. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Our protagonist, Kim Do-yoon, as usual, wakes up to his mother gently waking him, followed by a bit of bickering with his beloved sister, just like any typical youth. After receiving a bit of motherly affection, he walks with his sister to the school gate. They say their goodbyes lovingly, and he continues on with his friends. Suddenly, on the way to their classroom, they notice a group of students gathered around something, guarded by school security, and then, it appears, a black hole in the ground. His friend speaks up. "Isn't this one of those weird black circles? Did one appear at our school?" Another friend comments, "It's a hole. Anyone who goes in never comes back. I heard thousands have gone missing because of it." The security guard yells at the students to get to their classes. Inside the classroom, Kim Do-yoon sits attentively as the teacher talks about the black hole that appeared at their school. The phenomenon of black circles refers to strange holes that have recently appeared around the world. These holes are not related to gravity and can appear in the sky or on the ground, often large enough to swallow a car. Despite humanity's efforts to investigate, the cause of their appearance and what lies inside them remains unknown. The reason is that all devices malfunction inside the holes, making communication impossible. To this day, no one has ever returned after entering a black hole. After explaining all this, the teacher shares a recent incident. 5 students vanished after entering a newly appeared hole out of curiosity. He warns them not to play near these holes and to report them immediately if they ever see a new one. On his way home, as usual, Kim Do-yoon meets his beloved sister, and they happily greet each other. At home, the family celebrates their father's birthday and gives him a gift they all chipped in to buy. Their father is overjoyed, and they continue the celebration in happiness. Meanwhile, we see the black hole at the school, guarded by a security officer. Suddenly, the guard falls in. The next morning, as usual, students are in their classrooms. Kim Do-yoon feels bored during the lecture when suddenly everything goes dark. Startled, he quickly looks out the window, only to see the entire school collapsing downward into darkness. Screams and cries for help fill the air. A news anchor appears announcing an unprecedented disaster. A massive black hole has opened at Seon High School in Seoul. It was larger than any hole previously seen, and the number of victims has yet to be determined. In front of the school, a large crowd has gathered, among them Do-yoon's shocked parents. According to eyewitnesses, 17 students who weren't dragged in because they were outside, the hole suddenly appeared and swallowed the school, sparing only the courtyard. A total of 512 students and 38 staff members fell into the hole. Back to our protagonist, Kim Do-yoon, he suddenly regains consciousness, thinking it was all just a dream. But when he looks out the window, all he sees is pitch blackness. He quickly realizes it wasn't a dream. The school really did fall into the hole. The teacher checks on the students, asking if everyone is okay. It seems no one is injured. A girl named Seon-ah asks the teacher what will happen to them now, but the teacher doesn't know how to respond. He says he'll go check outside. Meanwhile, Kim Do-yoon thinks to himself, as long as no one's hurt, maybe things will be fine. Maybe the whole school didn't fall and they can escape through the roof. Suddenly, Seon-ah asks him, "Did you see that too?" He replies that he saw the school fall into the hole and tries to reassure her that everything will be okay and they'll escape. But she tells him, "That's not what I was asking." He's confused. "What do you mean?" She tells him that the school has changed. At the same time, the teacher is inspecting the corridors and finds that they stretch endlessly. He tries to use his phone to call for help, but there's no signal. Suddenly, a small girl appears behind him. Meanwhile, Kim Do-yoon asks Seon-ah what she meant by saying the school changed. She explains that as the school was falling, it was completely destroyed, and everything was jumbled together. It felt like everything had been rebuilt from scratch. Do-yoon tells her he doesn't understand what she means. Outside the classroom, the teacher turns to the girl behind him and asks who she is and what happened to her hands, but she suddenly gets angry and screams at him. "Why are you wandering the halls during class?" The teacher doesn't understand. He tries to ask her what she means, but before he can open his mouth, a doctoral certificate-like object shoots out of his back in front of all the students. Everyone in the classroom panics, terrified. A student named Seong-ji yells for everyone to get back inside. "There's a killer out there!" The class descends into chaos. Everyone runs around in a panic and follows Seong-ji's lead as he tries to escape through the back door. But out of all the choices he could have made, this was the worst one. Just as he's about to step outside, he's yanked back inside by a girl named Han So-jin. Then, a student named Jung-woo and Kim Do-yoon grab chairs to defend themselves in case she tries to attack. Suddenly, the girl appears in front of the classroom door. Do-yoon prepares to strike, but Jung-woo stops him, saying, "She's not trying to come in. She's just standing there." After staring at them for a few moments, she turns and silently walks away. All of this happened just 10 minutes after they fell into the black hole. They were already witnessing things they thought only existed in comics, but reality was something else entirely. The students, overwhelmed, shut the classroom door. There was nothing they could do for the teacher anymore. Not all of them had seen what happened. It had occurred in seconds, so Nam Jung-ho, the class president, explained everything to the others. They started trying to figure out what to do next. A student named Jun Seok mocked him. A monster killed the teacher, and that monster looks like the girl on our textbook cover. What nonsense. But the class president insisted he wasn't the only one who saw it. Jun Seok replied, "If that's what really happened, then it's simple. All we have to do is kill the monster. She's just a little girl, after all. And we're safe as long as we stay inside the classroom." He added that it would be better to deal with the monster quickly rather than staying paralyzed by fear and then begin searching for other survivors. Some students began to agree with his plan, but the class president tried to stop him, urging them to consider the worst-case scenarios. For example, what if the monster couldn't be harmed by their attacks? Jun Seok became angry and snapped, "So what, then? We just sit here doing nothing? That's not going to change a thing. Also, don't just say what won't work. Give us a plan or shut up." The class president replied that what he said was true, but they needed to prioritize escaping first, since they couldn't afford to lose any more people. Jun Seok shot back again, furious. "We can't even take one step out of this classroom and you're telling us to look for an escape route." Then he began asking the students who supported him if someone would volunteer to act as bait for the monster, allowing Jun Seok to sneak up and kill it. "You're insane, you bastard." That was Han So-jin, the girl who had saved Seung-ji by pulling him into the classroom, shouting at Jeon Seok. "The teacher was sliced in half in the blink of an eye, and you talk about this like it's nothing? Then why don't you be the bait?" A heated argument broke out between them. While Do-yoon tried to calm things down, the quiet student, Lee So-han, had been writing something. Then he handed it to the class president. As the president began to read it, he was taken aback and mumbled under his breath, "How to survive the black circles." Everyone immediately turned toward him at the sound of those words, and the class president asked So-han what he meant. How could he know anything about surviving in the black hole when no one had ever returned? So-han answered, "It means exactly what it says, how to survive in the black hole and return to the outside world." He asked everyone to stop fighting and listen to him, then began to explain. The idea that no one has ever returned from the black holes is what most people believe, but it's not true. There are a few unregistered individuals who survived and came back. If we follow what those survivors did, we might be able to escape too. As usual, Jun Seok, the class troublemaker, spoke up with scorn. "So now we're supposed to believe some YouTube theory you found and try it in real life?" So-han replied, "I'm not just spewing theories. My uncle was one of the survivors." But because of the flood of fake stories online from people chasing fame and claiming they survived, Jun Seok didn't believe him and demanded proof. So-han didn't offer any proof. He just said, "It's up to you whether you believe me or not. But there's no harm in listening, considering we've already fallen into the black hole." The students sat down and began listening intently as So-han read from his notebook. To survive inside the black rings, it's essential to understand what this place is. First, the black rings are places where everything, except living beings, is distorted. After saying this, most students didn't grasp what he meant by distorted, so Han clarified. The area outside the classroom wasn't as they remembered. It had been reconstructed negatively. The endless corridors and the monster they encountered were proof of that. Suddenly, Seona asked why the classroom hadn't changed, why the chairs and furniture looked exactly the same, and how distorted something had to be for monsters to come out of textbooks. In response to the first question, Sohan explained that objects close to living beings retained their original forms. That's why the classroom and its contents were untouched, as were the other classrooms. As for the second question, he explained that when he said everything but living beings was distorted, he didn't mean only physical objects. Even concepts were affected. Examples include the school's sports rules, illustrations in textbooks, urban legends about the school, and all other ideas that shouldn't exist in reality. They had been twisted and made real. Before the students could fully process what Sohan said, a girl named Nari pointed to the window. There's some kind of light outside. The students rushed to the window to see what she was talking about. Suddenly, the view outside was no longer pitch black, nor was it a prison filled with monsters. Instead, what they saw was the school itself, twisted into a never-ending labyrinth with no clear beginning or end. One student fainted. The rest stood there, frozen, hopeless, paralyzed by the realization that returning home might be impossible. But Sohan urged them again to listen. He continued his explanation. Second, the monsters here are hostile to humans, so avoid them at all costs. Third, time flows differently inside the black rings. 1 day here equals 1 year outside, so don't expect any rescue from the outside. Fourth, since the body isn't affected by time here, we can survive without eating for years. Not eating here is the same as not eating for 4 minutes in the real world. Finally, he emphasized the importance of caution, observation, and analysis, treating everything they encounter as if they were studying it. Only through experience would they begin to understand the difference between the two worlds. The students began to feel a small spark of hope, especially after the last thing Sohan said. The way out of this place isn't above where we fell in from. It's deeper, farther down into the black ring. All this information was what his uncle had passed on to him. Then the class president gave a short motivational speech, encouraging everyone to work together to make it back home. Suddenly, the bell rang, signaling the end of break time. Afterward, the students began working together to form a plan to escape the black hole. Their strategy was as follows. Create a map of the area outside the classroom to avoid getting lost in the maze the school had become. They would do this by exploring in teams of 4 during break periods. Of course, now that the rules had come to life, they had to return to the classroom during lesson time. Otherwise, after each break, they would regroup and combine the maps they had drawn. With repeated attempts, they hoped to piece together a complete layout of the place. Jeon Seok, as usual, mocked the plan. You think 10 minutes is enough to go out, explore, and come back? But Seona jumped in and explained that, based on what she observed, from the start of the class period, the teacher's death, the start of break, and now the end of break, she realized that the break period was longer than the class period. Upon further investigation, they confirmed that her theory was correct. The durations had been reversed. Now, break lasted 50 minutes, and class time only 10 minutes. And so, the issue of limited break time for exploring outside was resolved. However, a new problem emerged. The deeper they ventured into the maze, the harder it would be to return to the classroom. To solve this, the class president suggested searching for other safe classrooms and using them as new bases. As they began preparing, gathering weapons, portable lights, and timers to keep track of time, Wong Yoon bursting into tears and trembling in fear. But Soo-yeon quickly shut him up, while Do-yoon and Si-euna discussed the papers and pens they'd need for the mission. And so, the first team was formed. Team A, Kim Do-yoon, Wong Yoon, Si-euna, and Soo-yeon. Team B was made up of the guy with the cast, Kim Tae-hyun, Nam Jung-woo, Han Soo-jin, and Choi Nari. Next, we see Seung Jae. He hesitates to thank Soo-jin for saving him. Lee Mi-ji, the girl with oily hair, notices this and exposes him by shouting that Seung Jae has something to say to Soo-jin. At that very moment, she nervously approaches Soo-han and tells him they're on the same team. He responds coldly, which only makes her even more flustered. And with that, Team C is formed. Soo-han, Kim Ji-yeon, Lee Mi-ji, and Seung-jae. The scene shifts to the troublemaker, Ji-yoon-suk, chatting with the purple-haired Choi Hyun-jun about how ridiculous it is that the other students believe in the existence of monsters. Ji-yoon-suk then says they should try to join forces with students from other classes if they find any, and so Team D is formed. Ji-yoon-suk, Hyun-jun, Seo Ye-rim, and Seo Ju-young. Seung-jae tries to overcome his fear and takes a step outside the classroom, only to celebrate having simply stepped out. Just like that. Success, I guess. The class bell rings. The class president informs everyone that during the previous break, he had scouted the hallway and discovered that there was a path to the left and another to the right, and each of those branches into two more. With 4 teams available, each would take a different path. At that moment, someone wasn't paying attention. Do-yoon. He saw an image of his sister and was visibly worried about her. He offered some advice. What matters most is that you all come back alive. Don't push yourselves and don't try to fight the monsters. The bell rings again. The plan is set into motion. The break timer starts ticking. 12 students, 6 girls and 6 boys, set off toward an uncertain fate. The scene focuses on Do-yoon, lagging behind the other students as they try to leave the classroom. He's lost in thought, still unable to accept everything that's happened. A memory surfaces, his friend Ji-woo proudly showing them a drawing he made of them. But the group had gotten upset because they didn't like how it looked. Do-yoon had promised Ji-woo that he'd meet him in his classroom after class. Snapping back to reality, Do-yoon tells himself that now isn't the time for distractions. He needs to focus on escaping with the people he cares about. As the students walk through the hallway, they stumble upon the body of their teacher, which causes panic to ripple through the group. Seung-jae and Jung-woo decide to move the body away from the path. Right after, the class president begins handing out advice. Keep an eye on the time. Count how long it takes to go and how long it'll take to come back. Yeah, we get it. We'll go first. Why does he keep repeating the same stuff? Of course, that's exactly what the class troublemaker would say. The scene shifts to Group A as they move through the dark hallway, lighting the way with their phones. Naturally, it's time for our chubby Zenitsu to panic again, mumbling about how they should just go back to the classroom where the lights are on and it's safe. Soo-yeon tells him that he's free to go back if he wants. He shuts up. Do-yoon tells Si-eun-ah to mark any unusual things on the map. As they move deeper into the corridors, they suddenly notice a faint light at the end of the hallway. They approach it and discover that the path splits into 2 well-lit hallways. Looking at the map, they realize they've taken the corridor that was to the left of their classroom. Soo-yeon turns around and spots a strange drawing of a boy on the wall. She alerts the others. At the same time, Group B discovers a similar drawing, this time of a girl. Upon inspection, they confirm it's just a drawing. Based on the map, they've gone down the right corridor, opposite to Group A. Along the hallway walls, they find several eerie, grotesque drawings of boys and girls. Young-woo, the class president, suggests they return to the classroom, even though only 11 minutes have passed. He reasons that they should prepare more before delving deeper into these halls. Back to Group A, they decide to examine the strange drawing. Wong-yoon pleads with them not to approach it. Soo-yeon silences him with a single shout. Do-yoon walks ahead cautiously, only to find that the hallway is empty, aside from even more drawings of boys and girls scattered across the walls, floor, and ceiling. He decides it would be smarter to examine them more thoroughly before getting any closer. But then, something on the ground catches his eye, a pen. It looks familiar. He remembers that Ji-woo, his friend, used the same type of pen. Meanwhile, members of Group B ask the class president why he decided to head back. He tells them he needs to verify what the others found, because something about the wall drawings feels off, like they were created by monsters. Do-yoon spots another drawing of a boy on the wall. Then it hits him. The drawing looks exactly like Ji-woo. His hands begin to tremble as he imagines Ji-woo crying and screaming as he's absorbed into the wall. He shakes off the thought, telling himself it's just a drawing, just an illusion. His group catches up and scolds him for wandering off alone. His chubby friend sees the drawing too, and the two exchange glances, but say nothing. There's nothing they could say. Their growing concern for their friend says it all. They move on, silently hoping Ji-woo is safe. Soon they reach a point where the hallway branches into at least 5 paths. They realize now how smart the mapping plan was. Without it, they'd be hopelessly lost. As they wonder which way to go next, Do-yoon decides to follow the trail of drawings, hoping it'll lead to either his friend or another classroom. Seona continues drawing the map and marking the locations of every drawing they pass. Suddenly, Do-yoon makes a discovery. Each drawing has a counterpart, a matching image, and they all depict students from Class 2. Soo-yeon confirms this by identifying one of the drawings as the vice president of Class 2. Wong-yoon starts to panic again and insists they head back. This time, the others agree, since their plan was to retreat at the first sign of danger. Do-yoon hesitates, torn between fear and his hope of finding Ji-woo. But finally, he chooses to return, rationally. Suddenly, they hear a voice calling for help from behind them. A chill runs through their spines as they turn around and hear the desperate cries again, echoing from within the hallway. Zenitsu cries out, "A monster! A monster!" And without missing a beat, he bolts off, shouting, "Screw bravery! Screw half of it too! I'm out of here!" His teammates grow worried and ask Soo-yeon to follow him so he doesn't get lost. Do-yoon and Si-euna decide to check out the source of the voice. Since they don't have a weapon, Soo-yeon gives them one before leaving. Do-yoon and his partner creep toward the sound, trembling. He reassures himself. There are no monsters during break time. He asks Si-euna to stay behind and shine the light while he checks ahead. He sneaks up slowly and peeks into the hallway. There, he sees a student lying on the ground, crying for help. As his eyes adjust to the darkness and confirm there's no monster in sight, he approaches the boy and asks if he can stand up. What he sees next shocks him to his core. The boy's lower half is part of a drawing, while his upper half is still alive. Suddenly, everything clicks. The boy begins screaming, pleading for help. He begs Do-yoon to hurry. There's a monster that folds walls and turns people into drawings. It left to hunt others, but could come back any moment. He begs him again and again to move fast. Do-yoon is paralyzed with fear. Before the boy can even finish screaming, a giant hand, fused with the wall, swoops down and slams the boy to the floor. Do-yoon is frozen, unable to move an inch. The hand folds the wall like paper, returning it to its original shape. Now, where the boy once was, there's only color. He's become a drawing, completely. Do-yoon remains frozen, staring blankly at the wall as the massive hand finishes its task and retreats. From deep within the wall, a voice echoes a single word. Decalcomania. The scene now shifts to Group C, where the hallways are twisted and warped. The students follow Seung-jae cautiously, trying not to twist their ankles. Ji-yeon asks Soo-han if he's okay, and with a cold tone, he replies, "Yeah." Meanwhile, Seung-jae chats with Miji about the other groups. He believes everything will be fine, as long as it's just the twisted hallways and not actual monsters. They just need to watch the time and get back to the classroom. Soo-han surprises them with his cold reply, saying, "Guys, what are you talking about? We can encounter monsters even during the break." I don't need to explain their reaction after he said that. They ask what he means, thinking the corridors are safe as long as they move during break time. And that's the reason they went out to explore in the first place. Soo-han tells them, if you're in the corridor during class time, you'll be attacked. That was the rule of the first monster we saw. Why do you assume every monster will follow that same rule? The first monster followed the rule that students must stay in the classroom during class. And if that monster was created from the distortion of a Korean language textbook, then the monsters we'll encounter in the future could be born from distorted school rules or completely different things. Out of all the infinite monsters in this place, we've only made a plan against one. So stay alert. We return to Do-yoon as he begins to regain consciousness after the sound of the giant hand slamming the boy and slowly retracting back into the wall. He starts wondering why a monster is even here. Isn't this break time? The place should be safe. After the monster eerily repeats the word, decalcomania, Do-yoon loses hope of surviving and realizes he's as good as dead. Suddenly, he remembers Soo-han's words to them. You must observe, analyze, and think constantly as if you're studying. Moments pass and nothing happens to him. He notices the monster disappear back into the walls and starts thinking, did the monster let me go? No, that doesn't seem right. Is it just playing with me like a rat in a trap? What the hell is going on? The relief of surviving lasts only moments before fear takes its place again. Do-yoon tries to make a quick decision. Should he wait for the monster to leave? No, there's no guarantee it will, and I don't have the luxury of time. And the bigger problem, his friends are in danger because of him. Suhan's words echo in his mind again. Observe, analyze, think. He tries to recall everything that happened and piece the clues together to reach a logical conclusion. His chubby friend running away while screaming, the boy calling out for help, saying the monster moved away to catch the others. Suddenly, he stares at the wall like he's discovered something. He decides to test his theory. He throws a broom while praying in his heart that he's right. He looks at the wall and waits for something to happen. Suddenly, he hears the same voice from within the wall. As the wall starts moving again from the direction of the giant hand, and the monster checks for the sound, Do-yoon realizes that the monster doesn't see. It hears and reacts. He begins thinking through his deduction. The more I think about it, the stranger it gets. The number of students turned into drawings is double digits, and yet, I'm still alive in this position and haven't turned into a drawing. The fact that the monster didn't notice me despite being so close and returned into the wall led me to believe that it can't see. Then I assumed it detects people in a different way. If that's true, it must be by sound. But locating people just by their sound doesn't seem logical. Wong Yon was screaming while running away. That's when I thought maybe it doesn't detect sound. But as my thoughts tangled, I remembered what the boy said. The monster went far away to catch the others. That makes it logical that the monster detects people by sound. It didn't hear Wong Yon screaming because he was far away while it chased other students. And when it came back, it was because it heard the boy screaming for help. Finally, it all makes more sense. I survived because I didn't move or say a word due to shock. With all these clues, the mystery is solved thanks to Do-yoon's logical analysis. He begins crawling away slowly, trying not to make a sound. When he returns to Seon-ah, she tries to call out to him, but he tells her not to say anything and just walk silently. He'll explain everything later. As they walk slowly, suddenly a loud crash echoes from the corridor, and Seon-ah instinctively screams. Then the monster growls from within the corridor. At the same moment, Group B arrives as the first to return to the classroom. They check the time and find only 25 minutes left until break time ends. Back to Do-yoon and Seon-ah, the monster roars decalcomania, and then a massive hand emerges from the corridor, folding the floor and chasing after them at full speed. Do-yoon and Seon-ah run with everything they've got, while the hand chases them, trying to turn them into drawings. The gap between them narrows quickly, only about 2 meters left. Then Do-yoon throws his phone toward the hand, the ringtone turned on. With a terrifying crash, the hand smashes the floor where the phone rang. Then, silence. The atmosphere goes quiet again as Do-yoon and Seon-ah stand breathless and inches away from the hand. After a few moments of calm, the giant hand restores the floor, thinking the sound source was destroyed. On the ground, the phone was gone. Only its drawing remained. Seon-ah and Do-yoon stared at it silently, even 5 minutes after the monster left. Using the map, Do-yoon and Seon-ah begin making their way back. Moments later, they run into Wong Yon and Soo-yeon. Do-yoon begins screaming and crying after learning the fate of his close friend Ji-won. His chubby friend joins him, and the two cry together. And thus, the first exploration ends, with the monster's weakness discovered, and their friend's fate confirmed. 5 minutes before break ends, Group A returns to the classroom as the last group. Mi-jin welcomes them and asks how they're doing and whether anything happened to them too. Upon hearing the word too, they realize something had happened to the others. She tells them something terrible happened to Group D-. They left Ye-rim behind in the corridors and didn't bring her back. Before she could finish, 2 students enter who had been searching for Ye-rim in the corridors before break ended. But they found nothing. Due to the time pressure, the class president tells everyone there's nothing they can do now, but wait and pray for the class to start again. Then they can search again. Suddenly, Ye-rim's classmate Seo-jong screams at the instigator and calls him a killer, saying, "This guy didn't just try to kill Ye-rim, he tried to kill me too. We should expel him immediately." Jun-seok arrogantly and provocatively replies that he's feeling crazy and might kill her now too. Soo-jin steps in and argues with him, saying if Ye-rim doesn't come back, he'll be considered a murderer. Then the purple-haired Hyung-jun steps in and tells her to watch her words. The classroom turns into chaos, until suddenly, the bell rings. Back to the past, Group D was the first to head out, led by the instigator Jun-seok, with his constant mockery of what had happened to him and Hyung-jun. At the same moment, Ye-rim was crying over the teacher's death. Jun-seok told her to stop crying, then suddenly remembered that she sat in the front row, meaning she saw the teacher's killer, and demanded she describe it. She cried even more, mumbling a description of the monster, long, sharp arms unlike anything human. Then the instigator and his friend laughed at her. Moments into their exploration, they found an exit door at the end of the corridor with a large window showing the outside, where the school looked like a complex maze. The four kept walking, then came across the girls' restroom. Then Jun-seok told Ye-rim to wash her tear-streaked face. Ye-rim refused, afraid a monster might be there, so Jun-seok went in first to check. They didn't find anything. Afterward, he told her to wash up since the place was safe. Without anyone noticing, behind Hyung-jun, there was a mirror reflecting a frightening and terrifying reflection of the four of them. We returned to the classroom where Hyung-jun was explaining what had happened to them. He told everyone that after they checked the bathroom and noticed nothing strange, Jong-suk asked Ye-rim to wash her face and come out afterward. Then the three of them left the bathroom, leaving her behind. Ye-rim started staring at her face in the mirror. She took off her glasses to wash her face. Of course, without them, her vision became blurry. After finishing, she turned off the faucet, trying to calm herself down. She forced a smile and whispered encouraging words to herself. But then, looking into the mirror through that foggy vision, she saw her own face. Yet something about it was off, disturbingly off. Startled, Ye-rim quickly grabbed her glasses and put them back on to see more clearly. Everything looked normal again. Her reflection was just her. She muttered to herself that she was simply imagining things. But then, as she stared at the mirror, her reflection spoke.
No, you're not imagining anything.
Suddenly, two hands shot out from the mirror and violently pulled Ye-rim inside. The classroom troublemaker, growing irritated from waiting, started yelling loudly, "Hey, I'm not gonna wait forever!" Just as he finished his sentence, Ye-rim stepped out of the bathroom. But something was wrong. She was smiling in a weird, unsettling way. Jong-suk was shocked. He demanded to know why she had taken over 10 minutes. But Ye-rim didn't say a word. He grabbed her shoulder, shouting and growing angry at her silence. But she remained quiet, her face expressionless, or rather, strangely distorted. Then, out of nowhere, she opened her mouth in a bizarre, inhuman way. Hyung-jun, analyzing the situation carefully, noticed how strange Ye-rim's hands looked. Then suddenly he heard faint whispers. They were cries for help, coming from inside the bathroom. The whispers matched the movement of Ye-rim's mouth. Hyung-jun immediately sensed something was wrong. He grabbed Jong-suk and pulled him back, away from her. The troublemaker didn't understand Hyung-jun's reaction, but Hyung-jun, staring straight at Ye-rim, asked her, "Who are you?" Before he could finish the sentence, Ye-rim suddenly charged toward them like a madwoman. Both of them grabbed the only weapons nearby, their brooms. Jong-suk warned her loudly, "Don't come any closer. I swear I'll hit you." But she kept running toward him, faster and faster. So he aimed the broom forward and struck her hard. She collapsed to the ground. Jong-suk rushed to check on her, then turned to Hyung-jun and asked what was going on. But Hyung-jun wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on Ye-rim, who was now slowly starting to move again. She twisted her neck unnaturally. Then, like a puppet, she bent her spine forward, grabbed her head with her own hands and turned it toward them, revealing a chilling smile. That's when fear started creeping in. The figure that looked like Ye-rim, pale and lifeless, now turned her face toward Seo-jung. Seo-jung was horrified and instinctively backed away. Suddenly, Ye-rim sprang up at an unnatural speed, launching herself like a bullet at Seo-jung. But Seo-jung ducked just in time, and Ye-rim's face smashed hard against the wall. But Ye-rim got up again, unnaturally fast, and started chasing them. She sprinted through the hallway like a predator, but then she stopped abruptly. It was as if an invisible wall was blocking her path. Hyungjun stood facing her, trying to understand what was going on. She was banging her head violently against something unseen. That's when the truth became horrifyingly clear. The thing chasing them wasn't the real Yerim. It was her reflection. She had reached the edge of the bathroom's reflected space, a limit she couldn't cross. Meanwhile, the real Yerim was trapped behind the mirror. The reflection kept slamming her head against the invisible wall, again and again. And with each brutal impact, we see the real Yerim deep inside the bathroom mirror, smashing her head against the real wall, just as violently. Hyungjun continued explaining to the rest of the class. Even after we ran away and got down the stairs, we could still hear it, the sound of someone repeatedly hitting their head on the wall. And only when the sound started fading did we find ourselves back in the classroom. Even if I had wanted to bring her back, I couldn't. If you'd been in our position, maybe then you'd understand what we went through. The class president turned to Sohan, asking him if he'd ever heard of something like this. But Sohan replied bluntly, "My uncle survived the black hole. I'm not a paranormal encyclopedia." Sujin snapped at Hyungjun, accusing him. "So Yerim was acting weird? That's your excuse for leaving her behind?" John Suk cut in, frustrated. "Were you even listening? How do you expect us to bring someone who's smashing their head into thin air?" Hyungjun added, "That's not the only reason. There's something else. This may sound insane, but when Yerim came out of the bathroom, her voice, it sounded like it was coming from inside the bathroom. In other words, there weren't two Yerims." Sujin scoffed. "Really? That's the best excuse you could come up with?" Then suddenly, So-yoon said, "Then one of them must be a monster." Nari looked confused. "A monster? But monsters don't come out during break time." So-yoon replied, "That's what I used to think too, but I was wrong." She turned to Do-yeon and asked him to tell them what had happened. Do-yeon began recounting the incident, how they found strange drawings, how they were chased by a creature. The other students were shocked. Group B started to realize that the drawings they saw were of actual students. Meanwhile, Group C immediately recalled what Sohan had warned them, that monsters could appear even during breaks. The class president tried to comfort Do-yeon, so Yoon pointed out something chilling. "We saw a monster come out of a textbook, and now there's one folding through walls. So is it really that crazy to believe that a monster mimicking Yerim came out of the bathroom?" Then the class president turned to Seo-jung and asked, "What did you mean when you said Jeon-suk tried to kill you?" Seo-jung replied coldly, "He told me to stay in the bathroom with Yerim. If I had listened to him, I'd probably be like Yerim now." She continued, "We need to kick him out. He tried to kill someone. He even dropped the towel so I'd slip." Sujin, having believed her earlier, now seemed to regret it. The class president interrupted firmly. "Wait, that's your explanation. From what you just said, it doesn't sound like it was intentional. Given the situation, I think you misunderstood. But you can't just go around accusing people of murder." Jeon-suk glared at Sujin and said, "Watch what you say next time." She snapped back, "Shut up, nothing's been proven yet." Seo-jung stood frozen, ashamed by the class president's words. And just like that, the conversation died down. But the worry over Yerim and the growing sense of danger remained, even during break time. Moments later, the bell rang again, signaling the end of the break. The class president's group decided to go check if Yerim was still alive. Since they didn't know the way, they swapped Nari for Hyungjun to lead them to the bathroom. The path was clear, no monsters, but when they reached the same exit they'd found earlier, this time the doors were locked. While Group B was outside, the other groups were still inside the classroom, tense, panicking. Mijin screamed in fear. "What Sohan said. It's real. The monsters can come even during break time." She continued, "The danger's the same, whether it's during class or not. At this rate, we'll all be dead before we ever escape." Nari approached Do-yeon and started asking about the drawings they'd seen. Were those really of Class 3 students? Then, nervously, she began texting someone named Lee Ji-hyun, but the messages wouldn't send. No signal. Finally, Kim Ji-woon stepped in to calm everyone down. She began speaking to the class. "When I think more deeply about the monster that follows sound, I feel like it's not just sound. Maybe it's also connected to the school rules." Ji-woon wrote a few points on the board related to the case. She then posed a chilling hypothesis. If the monster knows the class rules, if it knows each student's name and class, Then using other classrooms as decoys might be dangerous. The students looked at each other, uneasy. Back to Group B. They were standing in front of the same exit doors Hyung-jun had led them to, but now locked. The class president asked Hyung-jun, "Are you sure this is the right path?" Hyung-jun tried to open the doors. No use. He leaned closer to listen, but couldn't hear the head-smashing sounds from earlier. Suddenly, Soo-jin spoke. "I knew this would happen. You're hiding something, aren't you? You led us the wrong way on purpose." Hyung-jun exploded with anger. "Watch your mouth." Kim Tae-hyun quickly stepped in to break the tension. He reminded everyone why they were here, to find Yerim. He turned to Hyung-jun again. "Are you absolutely sure you're telling the truth?" Hyung-jun nodded firmly. "I'm not lying." The class president checked how much time was left before class resumed. There was still some time, enough to look for another way. Time passed, but they couldn't find any other route. The class president began recalling Jong-suk's earlier suggestion that maybe they should just kill the monster. He blamed himself for everything that had happened. He wondered if things might have been different if they had gone with Jong-suk's plan. Kim Tae-hyun pulled him out of his thoughts. "This isn't your fault. If you hadn't stepped up, half the class might have died back in the halls." He tried to reassure him. Maybe Yerim locked herself in the bathroom. Maybe she's still safe somewhere. But the class president wasn't the only one feeling guilty. The group finally returned to the classroom, but the mood had changed. It was darker, heavier than before. After hearing about the locked doors and not knowing what happened to Yerim, the atmosphere only worsened. Some students were crying. Others were cursing their bad luck. Some began accusing Group B of lying about what had happened. The class president calmed everyone down. He reminded them that Seo-jung was also with Group B-. There was no reason to lie. They had to work together and figure out what to do next. In the middle of all this arguing, sadness, and fear, someone was quietly seething with anger, standing near the window, listening to it all. Then Ji-woon approached the class president with her theory, the one that had already caused tension and suspicion among the students. She began explaining, "The first monster we saw followed the rule. No walking around during class time. The one Group A encountered attacked based on sound. But what school rule was it breaking? Was it really just about sound? Because if that were true, then based on the monster's behavior, it seems to come from the art textbook. So what kind of distortion does that imply? What in this school reacts only to sound?" The class president shook his head. Maybe it wasn't just about sound after all. Ji-woon showed him the notes she had written in her notebook. Late-night self-study sessions. 3rd years plus mock exams. She continued, "Just like the first monster. It only attacked after a school rule was broken." The class president replied, "So Han's theory makes sense. It really does feel like this is all connected to the school rules." Ji-woon went on, "If that's true, then maybe what we're seeing here is the transformation of school rules into monsters." She paused. "There are lots of rules, unfortunately. But the one we need to pay attention to right now is no entering other classrooms." The class president stood in thought, deeply processing everything she had said. This changed everything. Up until now, we had only focused on how to deal with the monster from the Korean language book. We thought the solution was simple. Follow the rules during class time. But now there were more variables to consider. And if Ji-woon's hypothesis was right, then our plan to map the maze was no longer safe. The workaround we suggested for limited time, using alternative classrooms, could now be deadly, and it was clearly impossible to reach the maze's end in just 50 minutes. The possibility of escaping was fading. When So-han first said that all the rules had been distorted, we should have thought more carefully. I was careless. It was a critical mistake. What if we had entered another class without realizing it? I can't even imagine what would have happened. I came dangerously close to putting everyone in even more danger, and with that kind of judgment, what gave me the right to lead this class, even what happened to Yerim, was because of the map plan I proposed. This was all my fault. While the class president was drowning in guilt, Do-yoon's voice suddenly pulled him back. "Doesn't it seem like not all rules have turned into monsters?" And for the first time, the pressure slightly eased. Do-yoon continued, "We were running through the hallways really fast, and according to school rules, we're not supposed to do that. But we can only confirm the danger by checking for that smoke." He pointed toward Jaeon-suk, who was near the window, quietly smoking. Ji-woon, now realizing the flaw in her own theory, nodded. My assumptions may have been too far off. Suddenly, the class president recalled something Do-yoon had said earlier. When Wang Yun and I were being loud, the monster wasn't nearby. If it had been, we would have become part of the wall drawings. Those words triggered a realization. The class president called for everyone's attention. Let's take this conversation one step further, he said. Let's ask ourselves, what if only some rules turn into monsters, while others don't cause anything, maybe because of proximity? So Yoon answered, the first option makes more sense. There wasn't just one or two rules broken. The class president nodded. That's true, but think about Group A's situation. They encountered a monster tied to a rule we hadn't even noticed. He paused, then continued. Since we entered the black hole, the flow of time between class and break periods has reversed. So what if the rule we have to follow isn't tied to where we are, but to where the monster is? We were misled by the first monster, the one that attacked the teacher. It made us think we always had to follow the rules, no matter what. He took a deep breath. Of course, even if this theory is right, there are still a lot of variables to consider. But at least it would remove the pressure of having to obey every rule, all the time. So if we manage to escape, or if we can confirm that the Korean language monster isn't nearby, then maybe, just maybe, we can move around during class time, safely. And at that exact moment, the monster, the one from the Korean language book, was wandering happily through the hallways, humming a cheerful little tune. In the end, the class president's theory was just that, a theory, one that could very well be wrong. After all, he didn't have many experiences to draw from. He only had one reference, the situation Group A had faced, so he wasn't entirely sure of anything. Even if his hypothesis turned out to be right, there were still many variables they needed to consider. For example, were monsters the only things that became twisted because of the rules? And how far could a monster sense someone breaking a rule? So in the end, the danger remained the same. But So Yoon spoke up, saying, at least with the class president's theory, we have some room to breathe. The pressure isn't as crushing as it was before. Sung-jae added, Jong-woo's words are worth trusting. He's the one who figured out we shouldn't step into the hallway during the first monster attack, and he worked with Seon-ah and Ji-woon to uncover the shift between class time and break time. The students tried to calm themselves down, offering each other words of hope. What they really needed now wasn't logic. It was courage. The courage to walk out of that classroom again. Jong-woo's hypothesis, even if uncertain, sparked a small flame of bravery that had long gone out. The suffocating atmosphere where everyone believed they'd never step outside again had lightened just a bit. Thanks to the class president's words, a new wave of energy filled the classroom. It became a space filled with encouragement. Students telling each other things like, yeah, honestly, what's the point of staying locked in here? Nothing will get better unless we take action. Let's go back to building that map. So they made a decision. Once the next break bell rang 20 minutes from now, they would leave the classroom again. During that time, some students began thinking. Maybe Yurim had found other survivors in a different class. That idea came from the locked door Group B had discovered. Whether it was true or not, it was better than sinking into despair. So everyone silently agreed to believe it. Later, we cut to Nari. She was yelling, declaring to everyone, I'm going to fortify my heart against everything that happened and everything that will happen. From now on, I'll focus only on escaping. Her teammate turned to her and said gently, don't be so hard on yourself. She looked at him and snapped, hard on myself? You're one to talk using your broken arm like it's nothing. She slapped his arm playfully. I told you to let me handle it. The poor guy immediately regretted opening his mouth. Cut to Group C. Seung-jae was sparring with Miji, practicing punches. Ji-woon walked up and asked what they were doing. We're training our reflexes, Seung-jae explained, for whatever might come next. Then he asked her, wanna join us? Ji-woon shook her head. I'm good. Seung-jae didn't know what else to say. Ji-woon walked away and approached Sohan instead. She said, let's try training too. She raised her fist toward him, but Sohan clearly didn't like the idea. Meanwhile, Jong-suk and Hyung-jun stood silently near the window, not saying a word. As for Do-yoon, he looked completely lost in thought. Sayana walked up to him and checked in. Hey, are you okay? She thanked him for saving her life. It's thanks to you that we're still alive. Your logical thinking helped us avoid a major disaster, Do-yoon replied quietly. You don't need to comfort me. But Seon-ah almost on purpose took off her glasses to make Do-yoon laugh. And he did. You're really something, he said. Your eyes are swollen from crying. Maybe you should worry about yourself more than others. You're gonna be walking around out there looking like that. It was a small moment of warmth, and it made Do-yoon feel better. He smiled and said, thanks for trying to cheer me up. Let's get ready for what's coming. While they were talking, So-yoon was pestering Wong-yeon to say something. She suddenly called out to Do-yoon and Seon-ah, hey, Wong-yeon has something he wants to tell you. Wong-yeon turned to her, panicking. Aren't you being a little harsh? Can't you see I'm crying? So-yoon just raised her hand slightly, and Wong-yeon realized he had no choice. He gathered himself and began speaking. I'm sorry. I was a coward for leaving you behind and running off alone. He promised, swearing on his beloved guitar, that he'd never do it again. Do-yoon reassured him. It's okay, just do your best. That's all we ask, Seon-ah added. Just don't repeat it next time. Wong-yeon glanced at her and joked, wow, for a second I didn't recognize you with those eyes. I didn't think you were Seon-ah, as always. So-yoon gave him a light smack for that comment. Do-yoon and Seon-ah quickly stepped in to calm things down. In that moment, Do-yoon pulled himself together again. He realized he needed to stop worrying. He had to focus on surviving. His sister was waiting for him. He hoped she was safe. And then the break bell rang. Again, the second exploration was about to begin. Groups A and D were reshuffled. Seo-jong was now part of Group A, and So-yoon had moved to Group D. Why the switch? Because Seo-jong had caused a scene earlier, saying she'd rather die than go with Jeon-suk. So-yoon, on the other hand, had no issue switching groups. Before leaving, she turned to Wong-yeon and said coldly, I'm watching you. Wong-yeon thought he was free of her. He was wrong. Meanwhile, someone in the class was very happy about the group changes. The groups began moving out again, but this time everyone was more cautious than ever. They only communicated through messages on their phones. At the slightest hint of something strange, or even a faint noise, they would immediately return to the classroom. By following strict safety measures, all members made it back safe after this second exploration. Then came the third exploration, but it was no different from the second one. Everyone returned safely again, and with each exploration, their map progressed slowly but steadily, or so it seemed. By the sixth exploration, things got tougher. Progress slowed down. Why? Because their caution grew stronger, and the more cautious they became, the less ground they covered. Unfortunately, they still hadn't discovered any other classrooms within the areas they'd explored. That meant one thing. They needed to explore faster and be bolder than before. Time was slipping through their fingers. They had been moving carefully for hours, yet they had only uncovered a small portion of the entire maze. Elsewhere, in one of the school's dim hallways, a voice could be heard. A person was crying, pleading. No, don't make me do this. A bottle with a burning fuse came into view. The scene was happening right next to Classroom 1. Just to note, Do-yoon was from Class 4, and his friend, the one who became a drawing, was from Class 2. A loud scream echoed from behind Classroom 1. Thick, black smoke poured out. A student was standing in the hallway, trembling, his eyes filled with tears. He shouted at something in front of him, something hidden in the smoke. What the hell do you want? Why are you doing this? As soon as he turned to run, the fire beneath the bottle flared up even more. Then his legs stopped moving. He began floating backward, against his will, dragged straight toward the thing in the smoke. Back in Class 4, Seung-jae was staring out the window at the endless maze. We're moving too slowly, he muttered to himself. We've got to speed up. As he spoke out loud, Miji suddenly appeared behind him and scared him half to death. Seung-jae nearly collapsed. Don't do that, he yelled. I'm already on the edge here. Miji laughed. You complain too much, Seung-jae shot back. Oh, really? You were screaming like a baby earlier. Remember that? He started mimicking her voice in a mocking tone. Oh no, we're all gonna die at this rate, Miji growled. Shut up. You were trembling next to me too. Suddenly, the bell rang again. Break time. Seung-jae turned to Miji. What should we do this time? Ask everyone to rest during the break? Miji replied. Number, we continue the exploration as planned. You were right before. We need to move faster. Seung-jae noticed Soo-jin's towel nearby. The fabric had been torn off, leaving only the metal rod. It looked more like a weapon now, lightweight and possibly dangerous, but that was just an excuse. He wanted to thank Soo-jin for saving him earlier. Of course, Miji couldn't let that pass. "What's this?" she smirked. "Did you just confess your feelings?" Seung-jae blushed. "Shut up." The seventh exploration began. Group C was already deep in discussion. Seung-jae told them, "We need to stop using our phones for communication. It's slowing us down." Based on all 6 previous explorations, their path seemed to be free of monsters. So, the only thing they changed was turning off the phone messaging. Everything else, safety protocols, rules, stayed the same. All the groups had also agreed on this method, throwing objects to test whether the wall-folding monster was nearby. Seung-jae added, "We've done 6 rounds already. By now, we should be seeing results." He looked at the others. "What do you think?" Everyone nodded in agreement. They started moving, but Miji was having a hard time. She felt nauseous because of sickness from the overwhelming stress, and she wasn't alone. Many of the students were feeling the same way. 7 explorations, just hearing that number felt like too much. They'd done 6 full scouting runs over 6 different breaks, and when you added class time, the first exploration after falling into the black hole, the 2 hours spent searching for Yerim, and the short resting periods, it all added up to about 10 hours. 5 of those hours were under constant psychological stress. 5 hours of elevated heart rate, constricted blood vessels, and spiking blood pressure. That meant less blood to the brain, which meant dizziness, headaches, and fatigue. It was only getting harder. After some time, they reached a familiar intersection. As always, they stopped to rest and mark the map. Miji, clearly the most affected by the stress, sat down with a sigh. She muttered, "Even if we move faster than before, all we find are more and more hallways. Is everything blocked off, except our own classroom?" Before she could finish, Seung-jae cut her off and pointed forward. "There are more paths ahead. There has to be something out there." Meanwhile, So-han casually took a sip from his bottle. Ji-woon approached him, clearly thirsty. She wanted a drink too, but Seung-jae called them back. The hallway was getting too long. It was time to turn around. As they started retreating, Seung-jae heard a strange noise behind him. He spun around quickly, but nothing. He told the others to wait. He wanted to check the hallway himself. Cautiously, he crept toward the corner and peeked around it. Unknown to him, the others had quietly followed. He whispered to So-han via phone, "Pass me the bottle." So-han tossed it to him. Seung-jae then threw the bottle into the hallway. Test to detect the wall-folding monster. When nothing happened, they followed him in. That's when they noticed something odd. The bottle had landed in a strange, sticky substance. Miji grimaced. "I don't like how this feels. Let's head back. This place gives me the creeps." But So-han, who was at the back of the group, noticed something above. He pointed his flashlight at the ceiling and saw a terrifying sight. Dense black smoke, shaped like human bodies, floating above them. Meanwhile, Seung-jae's eyes began to adjust to the darkness. At the far end of the hallway, he saw it, a classroom door. He turned to MIJ. "Do you see that door?" Miji squinted. Then finally, "Yeah, I see it," she shouted back to Ji-woon and So-han. "Hey, we found a classroom. Follow us." But Ji-woon shouted back, "So-han says we should go back." Miji couldn't hear her properly. She turned around and kept walking toward the door. She tossed the bottle ahead again, testing the path. Then they reached the hallway's end. That's when Miji saw something horrifying. In the hallway to the right, a figure wearing a white lab coat, like a teacher. Its head resembled a test tube, smoke pouring from it. Its lower body looked like a wonwa tripod used in science labs. As soon as Miji saw it, she froze, terrified. Seung-jae turned to see what she was staring at and froze as well. Back with Ji-woon and So-han, they realized the others hadn't heard their warning. Ji-woon decided to go after them, but So-han stopped her. He said, "Look up first, then decide." Ji-woon raised her head and met the horrifying gaze of the smoke-formed human shapes above them. Now, each of the 4 faced a different kind of terror. So-han and Ji-woon with something monstrous floating above. Miji and Seung-jae with a bizarre being ahead of them. Everyone reacts differently to fear. Some analyze the situation calmly. Some freeze, unable to think or move like Miji now. and some act on instinct without thinking like Seung-jae had before. They'd made plans on how to deal with monsters, but facing one in reality was different. Seung-jae did the same thing he had done before. He grabbed his broom and threw it at the monster. Then he ran. The monster easily deflected the broom. It hit the ground far away. Seung-jae kept running. Miji remained frozen. The monster raised its arm and the flame beneath its body grew. Fiery chemical reaction surged upward. Suddenly, Seung-jae's speed dropped. He was being pulled backward toward the monster. As he flew, he grabbed Miji's shoulder, but the force knocked her down. He continued flying, helpless. Miji, now on the ground, snapped out of her daze. She looked up and saw Seung-jae being sucked toward the creature. Meanwhile, Ji-woon and Sohan heard a scream from deep inside the hallway. Ji-woon rushed to run after it, but Sohan grabbed her arm. "You're going there. You'll die. Why throw your life away? You're dumber than I thought." "I'm in a hurry," Ji-woon said. "I'll explain later." Sohan asked for the map. She angrily hit him with it. "I already memorized it." She ran off toward the scream. Sohan just stood there, holding the map, watching her disappear. We return to Seong-jae, who is being pulled through the air toward the monster against his will, as his head is inserted into the mouth of the bottle, and he begins to resist with all his might. Meanwhile, the fire grows more intense, and the yellow-green liquid begins to boil. Moments later, Seong-jae is seen sweating heavily and strangely due to the fire. Suddenly, Seong-jae melts and is fully absorbed into the bottle. Then the monster covers itself with its white cloak. All of this happens before the eyes of Miji, who is drowning in tears. Suddenly, the monster stretches out its right arm, shaped like a glass tube pointing upward, from which emerges a strange shape resembling Seong-jae's hair floating toward the ceiling. This is followed by black smoke in the shape of a human body, also floating the same way toward the ceiling. Then, from the left hand pointing downward, a sticky, strange brown liquid oozes out, like the one Miji saw on the ground earlier. Miji is frozen in place, crying helplessly. Then suddenly, she hears a whisper coming from her side. At the corner of the hallway, Ji-woon is softly calling out to Miji. Miji turns her head toward Ji-woon and starts mumbling and stuttering, letting out scattered words from her trembling mouth. Then Ji-woon starts analyzing the situation, thinking that making a sound doesn't cause a problem. But she doesn't understand why Miji can't speak properly. She thinks of a way to communicate and says, "Miji, raise one finger for yes and two fingers for no. Is the monster still in front of you?" After hearing the question, Miji raises one finger, meaning yes. Is the monster moving? This time, Miji raises two fingers, meaning no. Is the monster attacking? Miji raises one finger. Ji-woon then thinks that Miji isn't injured, but the monster is still attacking. Suddenly, she realizes something and quickly asks, "Is Seong-jae safe?" Miji points upward, crying and trembling. Ji-woon starts to get nervous and tries to look up, but a hand covers her view, and she hears a voice say, "Damn it, how annoying." It's Sohan, who continues, "If you want to survive, think about the school rules first. Don't just sit there doing nothing." Miji starts getting up little by little and looks toward the monster, which suddenly begins moving toward her. Seeing this, Miji almost faints from the shock and fear. Then through her tears, she quickly turns to Sohan and Ji-woon, asking what she should do as the monster is approaching. Sohan tells her to stop crying and start thinking about the school rules. Miji replies, "The rules? Why should I think about them?" Sohan tells her she's distracted and needs to focus, saying that she must figure out which rule the monster follows and plan against it. Then he continues, "Did you forget why the monster didn't attack you?" Miji replies, "Right, it's because of the rules." Ji-woon tells Miji to remember what Seong-jae did that caused the monster to attack him. Maybe she'll find a hint about the rules Seong-jae broke. Miji tries to remember, but unfortunately, she can't recall anything and says she was unconscious at the time, so she doesn't remember. The monster starts getting closer and closer. Sohan grabs Ji-woon's hand and tries to pull her away to leave. Meanwhile, Miji screams at them not to leave her alone. Sohan tells Ji-woon they should give up. Time is running out, and they'll also be in danger. Ji-woon pulls her hand away from Sohan and says to him, "You want to go alone? Why do you keep saying we should give up? We can help her. We all need to escape together." Ji-woon starts crying and continues, "We can still help, Miji, right?" Sohan coldly looks at Ji-woon, then glances at his watch. Only 15 minutes remain until the class bell rings. After staring at Ji-woon's tearful face for a moment, he turns back to Miji and says, "There's nothing we can do to help you. You have to figure it out yourself. Think about the rule that Seong-jae broke." Miji then starts trying to remember again. Suddenly, she sees the broom thrown behind the monster, and remembers what Seong-jae did. He threw the broom and ran afterward. Miji turns to So-han and tells him that Seong-jae tried to run away, and then the monster attacked him. Ji-woon begins to think and says, "So if the monster attacked after he ran, that means..." So-han finishes. "That means he broke a rule. No running in the hallways." Ji-woon adds that this is one of the basic hallway safety rules, also one of the expected rules they had mentioned earlier. Now that they saw this happen, it means the monster was triggered by that rule. "Miji, do you remember anything else suspicious besides that?" As Miji tries to respond to Ji-woon, the monster gets very close to her. So-han tells her that as long as she walks calmly, everything will be fine. So Miji begins to slowly walk back the way she came, and the monster does not attack her. Miji gets closer and closer to So-han and Ji-woon, and finally starts to feel a bit of relief. But suddenly, her neck bends back and she starts floating backward, as Ji-woon watches in shock. Then we see a hanging poster with science lab safety rules, with a voice highlighting 3 specific rules. In case of an accident, shout loudly. Don't play pranks or leave your seat during experiments. Don't take equipment or experimental chemicals outside. We return to Miji, who is pulled violently toward the monster while screaming at the top of her lungs. So-han freezes in place. Ji-woon quickly runs forward in shock, reaching out her arm to grab Miji, who is floating in the air. The scene shifts to Group A, now consisting of Do-yoon, Seon-ah, Wong-yoon, and Seo-jong, who switched groups. We see Do-yoon thinking that this exploration also didn't reveal anything special. They had explored every area they could go to except the one where the wall monster resides. Then he starts thinking they should return to the classroom. Suddenly, Wong-yoon slips and almost falls to the ground. Do-yoon checks on him. Wong-yoon says he's okay, but asks, "Guys, was there always a slope here?" Do-yoon finally notices and replies that it's the first time they've seen such a slope in the hallways. Seon-ah says she will mark these slopes on the map. They then decide to return to the classroom without hesitation because of Wong-yoon's discovery of the strange slopes. In the classroom, the bell rings. Only groups A and D manage to return to class, while groups B and C have not returned yet. Seong-jae died in a horrific way, and the fate of the other 7 students remains unknown. Rewinding time a little, we see Group D making their way back to the classroom. The 3 of them were alone after exploring the hallways, and with time running out, they decided to head back. On the way, Jun Seok, having finished his pack of cigarettes, threw the empty box onto the ground. Soo-yeon, who was walking behind him, saw him and scolded him. "Hey, Jun Seok, what do you think you're doing? Pick up that trash you just threw. Don't you know that's against school rules?" Of course, the class troublemaker responded in his usual way. "And what do you want me to do about it?" Soo-yeon replied firmly. "I told you to pick it up. If there were a monster nearby, we'd be dead by now. Don't you get that?" Jun Seok stared at her angrily. But after a few moments, he turned and said, "Who said I wouldn't pick it up? After all, we have to follow school rules carefully." He then picked up the cigarette box and added, "Also, don't talk about stuff like dying or being dead in front of me again. It grosses me out." Soo-yeon was surprised by his reaction. She then bent down to pick up the transparent plastic wrap from the box, which the troublemaker hadn't noticed. Suddenly, she noticed something strange. The warped texture of the floor, the curves in the corners, and when she touched the wall, it felt oddly warm. Then Jun Seok called out to her, telling her to catch up so they wouldn't leave her behind and get blamed for it. Soo-yeon stopped her inspection and followed them, as Jun Seok asked her for her name so he could remember it. That's how they became the first group to arrive at the classroom, followed shortly by Group A. Then the bell rang, but Groups B and C were still missing. Do-yoon found this strange and began to grow worried. Seon-ah reassured them, saying maybe the other groups had found different classrooms, then addressed the others. Break time passed quickly this time, So maybe they miscalculated and had to stay in another class for a bit. They're probably on their way now. Do-yoon fell back into his thoughts, saying to himself, for Group C, maybe what Si-yeon-ah said is right, especially since they're led by Shung-jae. But Group B, knowing the class president, I highly doubt he miscalculated the time so badly they couldn't make it back. He was the one who kept reminding us to keep strict track of time. Maybe he wasn't able to pay attention to the time at all. No, let's not think like that. As Si-yeon-ah said, they're probably just in another classroom. And the class president's theory is valid. They should be safe since they're outside the range of the Korean language monster. While these thoughts stormed through Do-yoon's mind, someone collapsed to his knees in despair. It was our chubby friend. Tears streaming down his face, he trembled as he said, 2 whole groups couldn't make it back to the classroom at the same time. Does that sound like a coincidence to you? Number, it's the monster. Both groups were killed by the same monster. Soo-yeon prepared to punch Won-gyun to snap him out of it, but Jun-seok beat her to it, stepping up and saying, why are you always whining, you little punk? What did you say? They're dead. Should I send you to join them? Do-yoon stepped in, grabbing Jun-seok's arm to stop him, telling him to cut it out, that even if Won-gyun was wrong, his reaction was going too far. Jun-seok shouted back, let go of me, Do-yoon replied. Then let go first, Jun-seok taunted. So what, you think you can fight? You must be really full of yourself. Come on then, fight me. That's when Seo-jung spoke up from behind them. Did you hear him? He talks about killing people like it's nothing. I told you before he actually tried to kill me, Jun-seok replied with a clear threat. Hey, no one's here to protect you this time. Don't you get that? Or maybe you're just too slow to analyze the situation. Maybe I should just deal with you first. A loud scraping noise echoed through the room, silencing everyone. They turned to the source. It was Hyun-jun, dragging his chair deliberately. He said, it's quiet now. I'm going to take a nap, so everyone shut up. I'll sleep for an hour. You guys should try to get some rest too. Si-yeon-ah spoke gently, while Seo-jung hid behind her. All right, everyone calm down. Now's not the time to be fighting. Let's all take a short break while we wait for the other groups to return. After she finished speaking, Jun-seok let go of Won-gyun while cursing under his breath. This is getting too chaotic. And so they all decided to wait for groups B and C until the next class period began. Then we see Won-gyun lost in thought as a hand gently touches his back. Of course, it's Soo-yeon's kind hand. She asks him what he's doing alone, then adds, look at your eyes. You're crying again, aren't you? Won-gyun denies it, but Soo-yeon continues, telling him he should try to choose his words more carefully. He's not the only one scared right now. Won-gyun responds, saying he doesn't know why he acts like this either. When his emotions take over, the words just come spilling out of his mouth. Then he says, I don't know how many punches it'll take to fix this habit. Then Won-gyun asks Soo-yeon if she's okay. She doesn't understand what he means at first, so he leans in and whispers to clarify. I mean, are you really okay about your group change? I saw it earlier while passing by. Those guys drank alcohol on Monday on the observatory balcony at Woonham Trail. They're total insane jerks. Did Jun-seok threaten you or something? Or maybe he's using you as bait? Soo-yeon replies that things are fine, but Won-gyun leans in again, whispering idiotically into her ear. If he ever threatens you, or anything like that, blink 3 times. Soo-yeon can't stand his stupidity and yells, idiot! She kicks him in the leg and he curls up in pain on the ground. She tells him he's overreacting. She barely kicked him. He groans. You hit me right where I got injured earlier when I tripped. She mocks him. You can't even walk straight now. He defends himself, saying it wasn't his fault. It was because of the weird slopes and angles in the hallway corners. Soo-yeon's surprised. She immediately tells Do-yoon and Si-yeon-ah that their group also encountered strange bending at the corridor corners. Do-yoon asks her to confirm whether they experienced the same phenomenon. Soo-yeon nods, then adds, yeah, and not only that, the wall felt unusually warm. Do-yoon is taken aback, and Si-yeon-ah wonders aloud if these strange occurrences could be linked to a monster. Soo-yeon suggests maybe these are traces left behind by a monster, like the drawings left behind by the art monster. We can't just ignore these things. We need to keep them in mind. Won-gyun, sounding tense, says, what we saw was really close to our classroom. That means there might be another monster nearby. Do-yoon begins to grow nervous. wondering whether the monster might come for their classroom next. Now they had two major problems. First, they didn't understand what was causing the warped corners or the unusual wall heat. Second, groups B and C still hadn't returned. The situation was getting more complicated by the minute, and all they could do now was pray for the others' safety and wait. Now we rewind again to exactly 50 minutes earlier at the start of the last exploration. We see Soo-jin right after Sung-jae thanked her for helping him earlier. She started recalling the harsh words she said to Hyo-jun, then turned to walk away, but by coincidence, she ran into him. He walked past her, seemingly ignoring her, but she called out to him. He turned to see if she was really calling him. She told him she was talking to him, then continued shyly, "Earlier, I was way too harsh. I'm sorry." Hyo-jun couldn't believe the words were meant for him. He looked around to see if she was talking to someone else nearby. When he saw no one, he asked her, You're talking to me?" Soo-jin didn't answer his question directly, but continued, "I thought about it again. I realized there's no way you would have abandoned Ye-rim on purpose. I think I misunderstood," Hyo-jun replied. It was easy to misunderstand, especially after what Seo-jung said, and the fact that we saw the door closed. "But since you've apologized, it's okay." Then Soo-jin asked him to pass along her apology to Jun Seok as well. But Hyo-jun told her, "You should tell him yourself. If you don't, Jun Seok's just going to be mad." Soo-jin huffed. "Ugh, fine. Let him be mad then. He's so annoying." She turned and stormed off, leaving Hyo-jun confused. Then Jun Seok approached Hyo-jun and asked what Soo-jin wanted. "Did she bother you again?" Hyo-jun shook his head and told him they should get going, but Jun Seok pressed him. "Come on, she definitely said something annoying. What was it?" Hyo-jun just said he'd tell him later. Next, the scene shifts to Nari, preparing to begin their 7th exploration. The rest of Group B joins her. We see them moving cautiously, far more carefully than the other groups. For example, they had compiled the school rules and categorized them by area, like the science lab, the gym, and so on, then shared this information with other groups and tried to memorize them during class sessions. For them, if they spotted anything strange, they would immediately return to the classroom, no hesitation. They also made sure to document every detail so nothing would slip through the cracks. The class president reflects that each exploration was taking longer, but he didn't see that as a problem. Even slow progress was still progress. He thought to himself, at this pace, the other classrooms are bound to appear sooner or later. We'll all go home alive, and we'll find Ye-rim too. After 10 minutes of exploring, the group reached a part of the hallway where the stairs were deformed and warped in a strange way. Nari stepped a little closer to the stairs, but suddenly pulled back and said, "Oh, it's hot. The heat here is really weird. Is something in there?" The class president began observing again, carefully noting the strange phenomena, how the stairs were shriveled and bloated, radiating intense heat. He marked the location of the stairs on their map, labeling it as a restricted area, signaling that the path was no longer usable. The group continued on, gradually lowering their guard. They adopted a strategy of avoiding places where they'd seen abnormal phenomena and marking those areas as off-limits. But in doing so, they began focusing on individual trees rather than the entire forest. This cautious approach severely limited their exploration. Every time they encountered a suspicious hallway, the class leader would mark it off and declare, "We're not going there." And one by one, hallway after hallway was deemed dangerous until finally they had restricted all possible paths. They had, quite literally, trapped themselves. But as we know, even if you trap yourself, problems will still find their way to you. Just after sealing off every route, the class president heard something. He turned, and soon after, he began hearing a strange noise approaching them. There was a fold in the wall, and it was moving toward them. Startled, he quickly composed himself and silently signaled to the others with a hand gesture. He pointed to the wall fold above them. The others noticed it too, and fear began to take hold. Just as they had agreed before, whenever they encountered a monster, they were to do 2 things only. First, observe. Second, do not move or run. This was based on what they had learned from previous encounters with the Korean language monster and the art monster. As long as they didn't break any school rules, they wouldn't be attacked. So, when faced with a monster, their safest move was to stay completely still. Everyone followed that plan now, no one moved a muscle. The class president began to think through the next step. All right, we're sticking to the plan. Now we need to figure out what kind of monster this is. He recalled what Do-yoon had said about the monster they encountered, how it had appeared at the corner of the wall, and how it left behind puncture marks like those found on the edges of sketchbooks. That's when he realized this monster was the same one that Group A had encountered. The description matched Do-yoon's exactly. Fortunately, they already knew this monster's weakness and how to deal with it. But the real problem was, the monster was on their way back, so they'd have to find a way to pass under it. The class president thought, there are two ways to get past this monster. One, we throw a broom to lure it away. Two, we quietly walk underneath it, one by one. As he was weighing both options, something suddenly approached them from behind. It was a ball, bouncing rapidly on the floor. What was strange was that the ball had a human-like face. None of the four had noticed what was coming from behind. The ball kept getting closer, and once it saw the four of them in front of it, it screamed,
"My ball! Pass me my ball!"
Hearing this, they quickly turned around. This was the last thing they expected. The art monster, now behind them, folded the wall and let out a terrifying sound.
Decalcomania.
As soon as they heard that word, the four of them started running, and the monster began chasing after them. To make things worse, the ball in front of them kept shouting the same phrases loudly, revealing their location. Tae-hyung, while running, noticed an exit ahead. He rushed in first, followed by Soo-jin. Then, seeing the manual lock on the gate, he quickly returned, flipped the lock up, and waited to close the door behind his teammates. The class president was slightly behind. As he was running, he saw the weird ball on the floor. It looked like a human head with tearful eyes. The sight was horrifying. Still, he ran with all his might toward the gate. Nari had just passed through and the door was beginning to close. The class president sprinted as the art monster drew closer. Just a split second before the wall could fold over him, he dove through the gate and they slammed it shut behind him. The monster rammed into the door from outside with such force that Soo-jin and Tae-hyung were thrown backward and fell to the floor. The class president turned around to check if the door would hold. That's when he saw black smoke begin to pour through the gaps in the frame. Then it disappeared. The monster's noise started to fade away. The class president let out a relieved breath as he heard the monster retreating. But the relief didn't last long. As he looked around, he realized the place they'd entered didn't look safe either. They had entered what looked like a gymnasium, filled with blue gymnastics mats stacked high in rows. All four of them noticed it at the same time. Nari suddenly remembered that Do-yoon had told them Class 3 was attacked by the art monster, the same monster that had just chased them. She began to fear that the friend she had been so worried about may have already been killed by that monster. Then we see Tae-hyung holding his left arm in pain. The class president asks him what's wrong, and he replies, "I hurt my arm when the monster slammed into the door. It's probably just a bruise." Tae-hyung then turns to check on Soo-jin, asking if she's all right. She says she's fine, but when she tries to walk, she realizes she's also injured her foot. Seeing this, the class president offers to help her walk, but she says, "I'll use a towel as a crutch." The class president realizes the situation is bad. Two injured teammates, and Nari doesn't seem well either. He thinks to himself that they need to return to the classroom immediately. He grabs the door handle and tries to open it, but it won't budge. Tae-hyung asks what's wrong. The class president tells him the door won't open. Tae-hyung asks to try and kicks the door hard, but it doesn't even move. That's when we discover the reason. The door had been flattened into the wall after the monster hit it. It was no longer a door. It was now just part of the wall. Tae-hyung turns and says, "It's completely blocked. It doesn't even feel like a door anymore. It's just a wall. What do we do now?" But the class president was extremely anxious, and he began thinking to himself, "This is really bad. The door refuses to open. That means we have to find another way out, which also means we'll have to take that path that looks dangerous. Even if we do find another way out, there's no guarantee we'll be able to return to the classroom. What if the exit we find leads us somewhere we've never seen before? We don't have enough time. The class bell is bound to ring before we can return, which means the Korean language monster will be there. So what should we do in this situation? What is the best choice we can make?" Suddenly, while all these thoughts and questions were flooding the class president's mind, Tae-hyung called out to him, "Hey, Jung-woo, are you okay? You look pale." The class president replied that he was fine. He was just thinking for a moment. Tae-hyung continued speaking. You're worried again, aren't you? Let's think a little positively. We're all safe for now, and we even managed to escape from a monster, right? And even if more soccer ball monsters appear in the gym, they don't seem dangerous and are easy to deal with, right? That means this place doesn't just have dangerous monsters. There are also ones we can handle. Upon hearing this, the class president began thinking again about the ball they had encountered earlier. Considering the fact that it made an annoying noise, it didn't even attack us when we were really close to it. Like Taehyung said, it didn't seem dangerous. But if there's one thing that's bothering me, it's those tears in its eyes. What do they mean? Or am I just overthinking it? As soon as he finished thinking this over, he told the others they now had to try to find another way out of this place. And so their journey to find a way out of the gym began. Only 20 minutes still remained until the class bell would ring. Group B, after searching for a little while for an exit, began to feel that something was wrong in this place. The class president and Taehyung accidentally found a cart for storing balls. But what was inside wasn't balls. It was the headless corpses of students. When they saw this, they froze in place, terrified. The scene before them clearly didn't look like it was caused by the ball monster they had encountered earlier. Something deep inside them told them there might be another monster inside this gym, but it was just a feeling. Taehyung, upon seeing this, nearly threw up. Then suddenly, Sojin and Nari's voices came from the side, asking if they were okay. The class president stepped back and warned them not to approach that area for fear they'd see the horrifying scene. He continued, "I'll explain later once we get out of this place. For now, we need to go somewhere else. Anywhere but here." Before he could finish his words, the sound of a whistle came from somewhere nearby. This terrified him so much that he froze in place, scared stiff under the sound of the whistle, which seemed to come from above. As the saying goes, the omen of evil never misses. That's why Jung-woo was cautious in his movements, but he couldn't control everything. After hearing the whistle, the class president raised his head and pointed his phone's light upward. And then he saw someone, or rather, something, that looked like a humanoid monster standing on top of the blue mats, with a red whistle in its mouth. Its face was shrouded in shadow, with only its wide, terrifying eyes visible. Its crouched stance resembled Spider-Man, and it kept whistling non-stop. Suddenly, it looked directly at the class president and gave a terrifying smile. The class president wasn't the only one who saw it. Sojin and Nari also saw the monster turn and grab something that looked like a human head. Suddenly, the monster dropped the head to the floor, and it rolled toward them. Then the shock hit their faces, because the fallen head looked like a human head shaped like a basketball, and the head started pleading with them for help, twitching violently and transforming more and more, until it looked even more like a basketball than before. It seemed that this head belonged to a student who had just recently been attacked by the monster. After decapitating her, it turned her head into a ball, just like it did with the rest of her classmates. Taehyung then joined them, still feeling extremely nauseous from the disgusting sight he had just seen. He asked them, "Guys, didn't you hear something just now?" No one answered him. Then he noticed that all of them were staring upwards, completely focused. Nari, trembling, looked down with teary eyes and said, "I hate this more and more. I really can't do this anymore. How am I supposed to avoid all this and escape?" Hearing her words, Sojin tightened her grip on Nari's shoulder to the point where it hurt, then whispered gently, "Don't panic. Hold yourself together and stay calm." After saying that, she patted her shoulder. Nari then suddenly remembered her conversation with Taehyung, when she told him she wouldn't let sadness control her and that she would protect her heart against fear. That's how Nari calmed herself again. The class president raised his hand again, signaling for them to stop moving. He thought to himself, "This time isn't any different. As long as we keep our composure, there won't be any danger. Just like we agreed before. We must not move." Before he could finish his thoughts, a ball was hurled at incredible speed directly toward him. He hadn't even realized it yet, but just before it hit him, Taehyung blocked the ball with a broom. The force of the ball caused Taehyung to drop the broom, and he turned to the stunned class president, whose nose had started to bleed, and asked, "What the hell is this now? Is this another monster?" Young-woo didn't answer. He stood dazed, staring at the ball in front of him as it began devouring the broom. He thought, so, my strategy was wrong again. This monster is attacking even when we don't move. The class president drifted into his thoughts again, blaming himself. He no longer knew what he should do next. Suddenly, the monster grabbed its whistle, took a deep breath, and blew it with intense force. The sound of the whistle spread everywhere, terrifying all four of them. After a moment of silence, voices began echoing from all directions, growing louder and louder. The four of them stood in place, unable to process what was happening. The voices sounded like the first ball they encountered, all saying in repetition,
My ball, pass, my ball.
The voices grew louder and louder, as if the monster had summoned them with its whistle. Suddenly, the basketball monster that had been nearby leapt straight towards Sojin with its mouth open, repeating the same words. But Nari quickly hit the ball with a broom, knocking it far away and saving Sojin. Then she turned to the class president and asked, What do we do now? Do you think you figured out this monster's weakness? The class president still looked dazed, clearly shaken and unsure of what to say. Then suddenly, the ball Taehyung had deflected earlier jumped toward Jungwoo again, but Taehyung kicked it away just in time. He yelled at him, Name Jungwoo, snap out of it. It was about to bite you. The class president looked back at him, apologetic, but still clearly nervous and unable to gather himself. Come on, let's get out of here first. We can't keep blocking every ball this monster throws at us. After saying this, he headed toward the path they had previously considered unsafe. The others followed, trying to fend off the attacking balls. The class president began thinking again. Maybe Taehyung's decision was right after all, and the path I thought was dangerous at first might actually be our way out. No, this is not the time to blame myself. While he was lost in thought, Taehyung was busy deflecting the balls away from him. The class president then tried to clear his mind and analyze the situation logically. Something's strange. All these balls from the very beginning were only targeting me and Sojin. Okay, right now we're in the gym. So what's the rule we might have broken? Even though we didn't move when facing the monster, and there are also those corpses inside the storage cart. Could the rule be? Suddenly, he turned to everyone and said, It's the gym uniform. The rule we violated is wearing the gym uniform during PE class. It seems this monster was distorted by that rule. Ever since it blew its whistle, the balls it sent have only been targeting me and Sojin. Taehyung replied, Now that you mention it, that sounds right, but am I safe wearing only the top part of the gym uniform? The class president answered, Logically, you should be wearing sports shoes too. But if we go by that, then we're all breaking the rule. So it should have attacked you and Nari as well. He paused and continued, But judging by the current circumstances, the level of strictness seems to vary from one monster to another. Like the art monster, it doesn't spare anyone or anything that makes a sound. The Korean language monster only attacks people. And this one, it seems to target both students and teachers who aren't wearing proper gym attire. Taehyung sighed with relief and said, So it's kind of comforting to know we just have to wear at least one piece of gym clothing. But just as he finished speaking, they heard a loud thud behind them. The blue mats were falling to the ground. The monster was now doing warm-up stretches, staring straight at the four fleeing students. Suddenly, it jumped and kicked the mats violently, causing them to crash into each other and collapse. Taehyung said tensely, I don't think it wants to chase us. Is it trying to crush us instead? The class president told them, Look ahead. The path is getting narrower because of the fallen mats. Taehyung then added, as if he had figured something out, I don't think it's that it isn't chasing us. It just doesn't need to. It's toying with us. The class president began thinking again. What should we do now? Even though we know what rule we broke, there's no actual way to solve the situation. Unless there's a rule that spares the injured, but the monster is still attacking, so I guess no such rule exists. Both Sojin and I, we've reached our limits. We need gym clothes. While he was thinking, Sojin noticed something on the side. She saw a door, an exit from the gym. She screamed to her friends, telling them what she found. The class president was overjoyed upon hearing the news and told himself, Finally, our problems are over. But that joy didn't last long. The door wouldn't open, even after Taehyung kicked it hard. He cursed and said, Damn it! Since we got here, I haven't seen a single door open properly. Suddenly, all the mats fell, but luckily they landed around the four of them without hitting anyone. The class president was briefly happy again, seeing the mats had only fallen to the sides. But as usual, his happiness didn't last long. The monster was still in the gym, and their biggest problem hadn't been solved yet. He said nervously to his friends, Guys, can you check one more time if there's any gym clothing nearby? After he asked, Nari responded, Yes, there is gym clothing. The class president was surprised and asked her where it was. Then we see her holding her jacket in her hand, looking anxious and saying, There's only one piece, and it's mine. So now they had one more piece of gym clothing, but two people needed it. That meant someone would have to sacrifice themselves so the other could wear it. Back to the monster, it was approaching them again, whistling non-stop. It stood on the blue mats holding a human head that was crying, while the monster smiled terrifyingly and stared at the four of them, who stood ready with their brooms to face it. But up to this moment, we still don't know who wore Nari's jacket. Was it Sojin or the class president? As they stood face to face with this living nightmare, only 6 minutes remained until break time was over. A few moments back, when Nari told them she had another set of gym clothes, the class president and Sojin began exchanging uneasy glances, unable to utter a single word. Taehyung, having witnessed this scene, once again tried to open the door desperately, but it was useless. He started screaming, cursing, and pounding on the door violently. As for the class president, when he saw this hopeless situation, he sank into his thoughts and felt as if he were suffocating under the pressure. He began talking to himself. Obviously, the one who should wear the gym uniform is Sojin. Her leg injury will prevent her from withstanding the monster. This is the right thing, both morally and humanly. But why do I feel hesitant? All it would take is a few words. I promised everyone that I would protect them. But am I not part of everyone too? The class president sank deeper and deeper into his dark thoughts, starting an intense argument within himself between his sense of duty and his selfishness. Who am I? Am I not the class president, the one responsible for leading everyone? Taking care of an injured friend is natural, but wasn't someone left behind before? Maybe he died because of your wrong plan from the very beginning. So, do you still want to act like a leader? I can solve everything. Your reams matter, and even this one too. You're just keeping me from making the right decision. I'm keeping you from the right decision. Do you even know what the right decision is? Fine then. What is the right decision? Letting Sojin wear the uniform instead of me. Is that really the right choice? Isn't everything I decide always turning out to be the wrong one? While drowning in his thoughts, the class president was startled when Nari handed her gym uniform to Sojin without asking him or seeking his approval. The moment he saw that, his expression changed. He felt betrayal, fear, tension, and every bad emotion crashing inside him. Sojin turned to Nari and said, "I told you to hold on and not to think in a defeated way, didn't I?" Then, right after finishing her words, she tossed the gym uniform toward the class president and continued, "Isn't our job just to take the hits from the balls and block them? So, I'll take the hits and block them, and you guys hurry and find a solution." Then she looked straight at the class president and said, "You're the smartest among us, so think of a solution." At that moment, Taehyung asked Nari not to cry, then said that he too would help block the balls. As for the class president, he felt his value shrinking more and more as he watched his classmates' actions and sacrifices. Suddenly, the whistle monster arrived, standing before them with a smiling face as he prepared to launch the ball at them. Of course, the monster would target the one not wearing the uniform. Sojin, the ball shot toward her at blinding speed, and miraculously, Sojin dodged it. She cursed under her breath, realizing that evading the monster's balls would not be easy. The monster grabbed another ball and prepared for the next throw. This time, the ball screamed with eerie voices,
My ball. Pass. My ball.
The class president grew nervous, his mind scattered as he tried to find any solution to escape this hell. But to no avail. Who could possibly think clearly in such a situation? The monster hurled the ball again, its mouth wide open as it shot toward Sojin. Luckily, Taehyung managed to block it this time, though with great difficulty. Seeing all this, the class president couldn't take it anymore. He collapsed to his knees while his classmates desperately tried to block the balls. Suddenly, the class president began hearing voices, people approaching the locked door. One of them said, "I told you, I heard sounds coming from inside." Another voice replied, "Why are you trying to open what we sealed shut with so much effort? What if the monster chases us again?" The class president quickly turned toward the door, a glimmer of hope seeping into his heart. Suddenly, the door opened and a girl spoke to her companion. "See, there are other survivors." She then shouted at the four of them, telling them to follow her quickly. After that, she grabbed the class president's hand and pulled him outside. Nari shouted at Sojin, telling her to hurry out while she blocked the balls for her. Sojin agreed, turned around, and began walking toward the exit. But suddenly, and in a bizarre way, a ball bit her ankle, screaming, "My ball!" Seeing this, the monster pointed at Sojin and blew his whistle. Horrifyingly, Sojin's appearance began to change. Her hair started falling out, and it was obvious she was turning into a ball like the monster's other victims. Nari, witnessing this, was terrified. Her whole body trembled as tears poured down her cheeks, and she called out to Sojin. But Sojin pushed Nari toward the exit and gazed at her with sorrowful eyes. Nari tried to go back to her, but the new boy pulled her outside while she resisted, crying in grief over what happened to her friend. Sojin's transformation worsened as the monster loomed behind her. Suddenly, she completely turned into a ball. The gym door then slammed shut on Sojin, forever. The class president finally woke up from his daze, noticing Nari crying intensely and Taehyung punching the wall in anger. The class president began recalling his thoughts and the previous scenes, realizing that the rational choice had been to let Sojin wear the uniform, since her injured ankle would make it hard for her to dodge or block the monster's balls. But he hadn't done that. Instead, it was Sojin who had thrown the uniform to him, letting him wear it in her place. The class president remembered his own words. The important thing is that everyone returns alive, which he had once told them. Overcome with guilt, he started strangling himself, crying, feeling unworthy of living after his selfishness had led to Sojin's death. The new girl, seeing this, screamed at her companion, telling him to stop him immediately. Later, we see the group in the hallways. The new boy was carrying Nari, who had fallen asleep from exhaustion. The new girl looked at the class president and Taehyung, who also seemed utterly drained. We then learn that the new girl's name is Kim Yul, and she is 1 year older than the class president and his friends. In other words, she's a second-year student. This also explained why she was taller than them. From this, we can deduce that there were still survivors in the school, perhaps in the first, second, or even third years. Kim Yul suddenly addressed the class president, saying, "My friend, I know it's very hard for you, but you must never repeat what you did earlier again." Hearing this, the class president lowered his head. Then suddenly he heard the recess bell. He checked his phone and began thinking about the theory he had once proposed to his friends, that each monster has a limited range and a specific area from which it attacks those who break the rules. That is, even though he and his friends had broken the rule of staying inside the classroom, the Korean language monster hadn't attacked them, since it was restricted to the area around their previous classroom. Now, however, they were far beyond its range. Thinking all this through, the class president muttered to himself, "Well, I guess sometimes I do manage to guess things right." The group finally arrived at classroom 1, which belonged to the second-year students. Kim Yul called out to those inside, telling them they had returned. A girl welcomed them with a smile, accompanied by another boy. Back at classroom 4, which belonged to the first-year students, we see Do-yoon asking Soyeon nervously, "Not just on our side, but for you guys too. Did you witness the same phenomenon in the place you explored?" Soyeon answered with a nod, saying, "Yes, and not only that. Besides the ripples on the ground and walls, there was something else strange. The wall was warm." When the others heard that, they began wondering about the possibility of a monster being connected to this phenomenon. And during all of this, Seo-jung was staring at them in silence, while thinking to herself, "Why are they talking among themselves and leaving me out? Not only that, but even the class president doesn't stand by my side. There's Sojin and the others ignoring me, and Ji-yeon-seok threatening to kill me. They're all the same. What a pathetic class I'm in. Out of 16 people, I'm the only normal one among them. Why am I the only normal one? Truly, there's not a single one of them I can trust. I have to rely only on myself." Right after saying this, she opened her locker, grabbed a scalpel, and her face twisted into an ugly expression. We then see Do-yoon with his chubby friend, Wong-yeon, who said, "Thank you, Do-yoon, for what you did earlier, when you stopped Ji-yeon-seok." Hearing this, Do-yoon playfully punched Wong-yeon on the shoulder and said jokingly, "Oh, why do you look more hittable than usual?" Suddenly, Wong-yeon's expression turned serious as he asked Do-yoon, "Hey, Do-yoon, don't I seem pitiful to you as well?" Do-yoon replied, "Well, actually, yeah, a little. No, maybe a bit more than just a little. Okay, maybe more pitiful than ordinary people. But still, you don't do it with bad intentions, right? So I don't think it really matters." Do-yoon hit Wong-yeon's arm again and continued, Well, I can't give you some cringy words of encouragement, the chubby one answered, saying he didn't want to hear such words anyway, then continued, I'll change my personality from now on. I won't run away anymore, and I won't say pitiful things again. Do-yoon smiled and replied that it was good, but then his expression suddenly changed as he said, I'm worried about my sister. I don't know if she's okay or not. Hearing this, Wang-yeon answered firmly, Of course she's fine. Why are you saying such worrying things? Do-yoon replied sarcastically, Look who's talking. Weren't you the one who said we're in a catastrophic scenario and that we'd all die? The chubby one responded that those were the words of the old Wang-yeon, but the new Wang-yeon would never say such pitiful things again. The scene then shifts to Seon-ah, who was scrolling through her phone. Suddenly, So-yeon approached her and asked what she was doing. Seon-ah replied that she was bored, so she started looking through the pictures on her phone. So-yeon said she wanted to join her in looking at the pictures, so Seon-ah began swiping through them, commenting on each one. This one's from when the cherry blossoms bloomed, and this one's from when April came, but suddenly it snowed, so everyone was wearing padded jackets. And this one's from the day we all shared scary stories together. Suddenly, Seon-ah began crying. So-yeon tried to comfort her, saying, Oh, Seon-ah is crying again. Don't cry, okay? Please stop. Seon-ah replied that she hadn't meant to cry, but their situation was just too frightening. Then she added, I hope groups B and C return safely. So-yeon answered that they would definitely come back safely, since they weren't careless or stupid people. Suddenly, Wang-yeon walked over to get his guitar. When he noticed Seon-ah crying, he spoke to So-yeon, saying, So-yeon, why did you make her cry? Poor Wang-yeon didn't get an answer, only So-yeon's fist, which knocked him to the floor. At that moment, the recess bell rang again, signaling that a whole hour had passed since groups B and C disappeared, yet still none of them had returned. After that, we see Hyunjun's phone ringing, also reminding him that recess time had ended, but he just turned it off and went back to sleep, until Ji-yeon-seok approached him, trying to wake him up, saying they had to go. Group D, consisting of 3 people, decided to go exploring again. When Do-yoon noticed them, he asked what they were trying to do. Ji-yeon-seok replied that they shouldn't just stay in the classroom waiting, but should continue searching, because maybe the other 2 groups were safe somewhere. Hearing this, Do-yoon thought that Ji-yeon-seok's words weren't wrong, so he also decided that they should go and continue exploring. We return to the scene of the previous tragedy, the place where Group C encountered the laboratory monster. Inside Classroom 1, which belonged to the first-year students, So-han was checking his watch with visible indifference, while Jae-woon cried bitterly. So-han suddenly turned to her and told her to stop crying, but she couldn't. Her tears only flowed harder as she said with a trembling voice, If only I had been a little faster. If only my voice had been louder, then I could have saved Sung-jae. Yes, Miji had not died as everyone thought. She had been saved miraculously, but now she too was crying bitterly over the loss of her friend Seong-jae. Going back to what happened earlier, we see Miji moving slowly toward Ji-woon and So-han, but suddenly the monster stretched out its arm toward her. Miji began being dragged toward it against her will. Seeing this, Ji-woon dashed forward with lightning speed toward Miji, reaching out to grab her before she reached the monster. Luckily, Ji-woon caught Miji's hand while she was suspended in the air. Ji-woon tried pulling her friend back, but the monster's pull was stronger. Ji-woon didn't give up and pulled harder and harder, but suddenly the monster bent its arm, pulling Miji even more forcefully, so much that Ji-woon herself started getting dragged toward it, even rising off the ground. But then So-han grabbed her and pinned her to the floor, yelling at her, Why did you run in and throw yourself into this situation? If you were just going to rush toward the monster to die with her, then what's the point? Fine. Look around quickly. Maybe you'll find a solution. Hearing this, Ji-woon started glancing around, while recalling something she had asked So-han earlier during class. She had asked him, So-han, there's something I want to ask you about the monsters. Not the ones from ghost stories, but the monsters from the school rules. Is each monster linked and twisted from only one specific school rule? So-han answered that he didn't know for sure, but maybe it was different for each monster. Then he asked why she was even bringing it up. Ji-woon replied, because that way we can find a solution, instead of just running away. Remembering this, Ji-woon began telling herself that she first needed to figure out which rule the monster had been twisted from, because that was the most important thing. Then she hypothesized that the rule, no running in the hallways, was not the one this monster came from. After that, Ji-woon continued analyzing. So then, is this monster connected to the common ghost stories around the school, or what? No, I've never heard of a monster like this before. Obviously, the monster attacked Miji after she moved from her spot, so it's highly likely that the monster is tied to a school rule. Okay, in that case, which rule did Miji break? While Ji-woon was drowning in her thoughts, trying to analyze and connect the dots, the monster was pulling harder and harder, and Ji-woon was nearly losing her grip on Miji. Suddenly, So-han shouted at Ji-woon, "Don't be fooled into only looking at the hallways to find the rule. Look at the monster's appearance too. The rule might be connected to the science lab." Upon hearing So-won's words, Ji-woon began thinking to herself, the science lab has safety rules and guidelines that must be followed. Those rules were always written on a sheet and posted right in front of our eyes. One of those rules is, do not loiter or leave your seat while conducting experiments. And clearly, the monster attacked Miji because she broke that rule. But right now, I shouldn't be looking for the problem. I should be looking for the solution. Back to the rules. When we do something wrong in the lab, we apologize. And when our points are deducted as punishment, all we can do is earn more merit points. Also, there's another rule, which says that if any accident occurs in the lab, the very first thing we must do is inform the teacher loudly. So maybe the solution is to call for the teacher's help. Suddenly, Ji-woon shouted at the top of her lungs, "Teacher, please help us!" And no sooner had she spoken than Miji stopped floating and fell to the ground. The monster's flame went out, and Ji-woon stared as it slowly turned away, retreating little by little. So-won yelled at the two girls, warning them, "We don't have much time to waste sitting here crying." He then ordered them to quickly get inside the classroom. And so the three of them survived the attack. Yet in the chaos, they lost their classmate. At the same time, however, they discovered the monster's weakness and the way they might be able to fight it. We return to the present time, an hour after they survived the monster. Group C had settled in classroom number 1, the first-year students section, because Miji was in such deep shock that she couldn't move. Luckily, she finally regained consciousness, but collapsed into tears once again. So-won turned to Ji-woon, his tone sharp, and said, "Kim Ji-woon, you know what you did was extremely dangerous, don't you? If your earlier assumption about the rule not to enter another class's room during lesson time had been correct, and that rule had also been distorted, then even if you saved Miji, we would all be dead by now. Don't ever act without thinking again." Ji-woon answered him, "That's why I told you to go without me. And if you're going to talk like this, then why did you come to help at all?" So-won hesitated to reply, but Ji-woon continued, "I know, you were worried because we're friends, right? Even if you act cold, you're still thinking about all of us." So-won coldly replied, "Are you done with your baseless assumptions?" But Ji-woon refused to back down. She pressed on stubbornly. "Then never say again that we should abandon someone. We can save them if we truly try." So-won wanted to reply calmly, but anger suddenly overtook him, and he exploded, shouting loudly, "What happened was nothing but sheer luck. Do you think every monster has rules you can exploit to fix your mistakes and undo them? And also, the only reason I came back to you at all was because I remembered the stories about ghosts, that monsters appear when someone is alone. And now, who do you think you're calling a friend? Pretend to know anything when in truth, you don't know a thing at all." As soon as his words ended, So-won realized the harshness of what he had just said. Silence fell. The two of them stared at each other while Miji slowly stopped crying and trembling. The scene then shifts to Group B, who were in the classroom for second-year students. Because of their accumulated exhaustion, they had fallen into a deep sleep. And of course, their sleep was not free from dark, terrifying nightmares. In his dream, the class president saw So-jin strangling him with both hands. She squeezed with suffocating strength, while he was completely powerless to resist. Suddenly, So-jin began speaking, her voice filled with anger and bitterness. "Because of you, I'm dead now. I trusted you enough to hand over my gym clothes." As her words pierced his heart, her appearance began to distort gradually, transforming into the form of the monster ball. At that moment, the class president could no longer hold himself together. Tears streamed down his face as he desperately apologized over and over again, his voice filled with hopeless regret. Sojin continued her terrifying transformation as her voice rose, screaming again and again.
Why did you do it? You useless bastard! Why did you do it? Why did you do it? Why did you do it?
Her words echoed chillingly, and with each repetition their weight pressed harder on his chest. Then suddenly another version of the class president appeared, another him wearing the gym uniform. He approached with firm steps, and then suddenly kicked Sojin violently to shove her away, shouting, "Why did I do it? I did it to live, damn it! I must live too!" He began kicking her again and again, as if pouring all his despair into each strike. Then he turned toward his original self, screaming with madness, "I must live too, isn't that right? I'm the most important person to myself. So stop pretending to be nice, you fool." And with that, the class president's nightmare ended. He jolted awake, breathing heavily as a suffocating dread consumed him. Suddenly, a voice asked him, "Did you sleep well?" The one speaking was a girl named Shim Yujin, who was also a class president. She continued asking, "So, can we talk for a moment?" As she said this to the class president, she also called over Tai Hyung and Nari to join them, and together they formed a circle of 7 people. Shim Yujin began speaking to the class president. "I heard what happened from your friends. I know this is really hard for you right now. It's still very hard for us too. I truly wish I could make things easier for you, but that's impossible, since we're no longer even sure if this place is safe. Well, should we start first by introducing ourselves? But you don't look like second-year students. You must be first years, right?" And as we said earlier, Kim Yul and her friends were the second-year students, with Shim Yujin as their class president, along with the green-haired boy Woo Jiho and the delinquent-looking boy Lee Chan-suk. The class president asked in surprise, "Are there really only 4 survivors in this classroom?" Shim Yujin confirmed with a nod, and shock spread across Nari's and the class president's faces. Meanwhile, sorrow and grief darkened the expressions of Woo Jiho and Shim Yujin. The latter continued, "What happened during the past 10 hours? And what we've learned in that time? I'll tell you everything. But after that, you must tell us your story too. From now on, we'll be together, so we shouldn't keep secrets from each other." The class president agreed, and then Shim Yujin began recounting what had happened to them. A flashback begins to Shim Yujin's classroom. They were in class as usual, with the teacher giving a lecture, while the delinquent-looking boy nudged Kim Yul awake from her nap. Suddenly, one girl raised her hand to ask permission to go to the nurse's office. The teacher agreed. As the girl was leaving the room, Kim Yul asked her, "Do-hyun, are you okay? Are you in pain somewhere?" The girl replied that her head hurt a little. Of course, that girl going to the nurse's office would seem familiar to you. But that's not our focus now, because just moments later, the class president found herself staring out the window as the world outside suddenly turned pitch black. We returned to the class president, who continued speaking to everyone, saying, "Perhaps all of you already know what happened up to this point," as the entire classroom turned into a state of extreme panic. Some screamed while others cried. The teacher calmed everyone down, saying, "Everyone, calm down. Everything will be all right. We need to keep calm, especially at times like this." Suddenly, an announcement began coming from the classroom speakers. "Attention! Attention! Everyone! Evacuate the classroom and head to the gymnasium, please." As soon as the announcement ended, the teacher ordered everyone to follow the evacuation orders, telling them that as long as they followed the instructions they had previously learned in the disaster drill training, there would be no problems. Kim Yul approached the class president to ask her, "Yujin, Do-hyun will be okay, right?" The class president replied to her saying, "Yes, there's also a teacher in the nurse's office, so she should be fine." They probably heard the announcement too. When the class president said this, she suddenly began feeling a strange sensation within herself, and she hurried to stop Kim Yul from leaving the classroom. The students did not understand what was happening, as one of them said, "Shim Yujin, what are you doing? Move. The teacher told us to go out into the hallway." The class president responded to him saying, "I know I might look crazy for doing this in a situation like this, but something's strange. I'm sure all of you saw it too. The entire school was falling into that black circle. So how can they be asking us to evacuate to the gymnasium?" The student, upon hearing this, replied by saying that perhaps the school didn't completely fall into the black circle. Woo Jiho followed up by saying, "Yeah, maybe he's right, since the building is intact and didn't collapse. Upon hearing this, the class president couldn't say anything else except that she told them she would go outside as well. And as soon as she turned around, she found in front of her the student who had left before them for the nurse's office, sticking his fingers into his ears in a terrifying way. The class president, upon seeing this, was shocked as the student began repeating in terror, saying, "Evacuate. Please leave the classroom and evacuate." The class president turned toward the windows and found everyone repeating the same thing while jamming their fingers into their ears to the point that blood was coming out. The student who had previously objected to the class president's words shouted, saying, "My God, what suddenly happened to everyone? What the hell is going on?" Suddenly, the announcement voice came again from the speaker, saying, "Evacuate in an orderly manner. Evacuate in an orderly manner." As soon as the announcement ended, the students outside began forming a straight line while they moved away from the classroom. And thus, Shim Yujin continued her words to Group B, saying, "And so, from the very beginning, only 7 of us remained in the classroom, and it didn't take long before we realized something was wrong with the school, so we could no longer trust the announcements. Following its instructions would only lead us into danger, and as we expected, the teacher and the other students never came back. So, after a few hours, we thought we needed to check the situation outside. A number of us gathered and left the classroom, and after a while we reached the gymnasium, and you know what happened. Some of us survived, and we managed to close the door and escape. And after a few more hours, we left the classroom again, and that's when Kim Yul heard your voices. That's everything we went through up until now. Now it's your turn to tell us your story." The class president began speaking, saying, "All right, but before I begin, I want to know the reason why you said you're not sure the situation is safe here." We returned to Group A, which had gone out exploring again. Suddenly, a voice began coming from the ceiling speaker, saying, "Attention! Attention! Please use the emergency stairs for evacuation." Woong Yoon noticed the door beside him, then said to his companions, "Guys, did you hear the announcement? There must be a survivor in the broadcasting room, so let's head toward the stairs." Do-yoon replied to his chubby friend, saying, "Wow, a voice from nowhere in a situation like this, asking us to evacuate using the stairs right in front of our eyes. Obviously, that's suspicious. So ignore this stupid announcement." Woong Yoon agreed with what Do-yoon said, then they continued walking, and thus, Group A faced the same thing that the second-year students had faced. A monster linked to common ghost stories, specifically the story of the broadcasting ghost. And what should be done when encountering it is simply to ignore it, just as Group A did. And going back to before the exploration began, Group A had set 3 goals for this 8th exploration. The first goal was to find a new classroom. The second goal was to find clues about their missing friends. And the third goal was to find the cause of the strange phenomenon present in the hallways. Do-yoon continued explaining these goals, saying, "The first goal, which is to find the classroom, is something we always do, so let's skip that. The second goal is to search for clues about our missing friends, so we will head in the direction where Team B went." Woong Yoon interrupted Do-yoon, saying, "Wouldn't it be better to trust our friends and wait a little longer, maybe for about 1 more class period? What I said has nothing to do at all with me being afraid of going into the area where Team B was assigned. You know my heart, don't you?" Do-yoon replied to him, saying, "All right, as you said, so we should first start with the third goal, which is to go to the place where you tripped before and search for the cause of the strange phenomenon in the hallways." Woong Yoon knelt down on his knees, saying to himself, "Thank God, we survived." And thus we see Group A searching the hallways for the cause of the bends and bulges in the walls and floors, as Do-yoon began thinking to himself, saying, "I don't know where we should start searching to discover the cause of the problem, and that's because of the wide range of this phenomenon. Even Group D said they encountered the same phenomenon." Suddenly, Do-yoon began noticing the walls while talking to himself, saying, "In addition to the place where Woong Yoon tripped earlier, this phenomenon began appearing on the walls intermittently. But I don't know whether this is because I'm aware of the phenomenon or if it's actually true." And because Group A did not find any clues about the phenomenon, they continued their way through the hallways while continuing to draw their map of the areas they explored. And so, as the minutes passed and they explored more and more places, they suddenly arrived at a location full of windows, where Do-yoon took a glance outside. Then suddenly, Woong Yoon stopped him, saying that they should take a short break to catch their breath. Do-yoon agreed to this, while Wong-yoon leaned against the railing and rested his head on the window, where Seon-ah warned him about doing that because it was dangerous. After that, she turned toward Seo-jung to ask her how she was, but the ugly one replied to her saying, "Why are you pretending we're close? Mind your own business." Soo-young was surprised by this, then apologized to her, but Do-yoon intervened, saying, "Hey, Choi Seo-jung, Seon-ah was just trying to be friendly with you. How can you talk to her like that?" Seo-jung muttered to herself, saying, "As expected, they're all the same." Do-yoon didn't hear what she said, so he told her to repeat it. But Seo-jung stepped back, trying to pull the scalpel out of her pocket, while saying, "What, are you going to hit me like Ji-yeon-seok did too?" Suddenly, Wong-yeon stepped in between them, saying, "You definitely shouldn't be arguing loudly in the hallways, right? The monster might come to our location because of this. Well, look at the view outside. It's horrible, of course, but it's also like a work of art, isn't it?" Hearing this, Do-yoon replied, "Wait a minute. It seems you misunderstood something. I wasn't trying to argue. I was trying to say that if we want to keep going together, then we have to be considerate of one another. So, Seo-jung, let's try to understand each other, okay?" The ugly girl, hearing this, turned away, ignoring what was said to her, while Do-yeon was baffled by the strange reactions of this suspicious girl. After that, Do-yeon ordered his companions that they had to return to the classroom because they didn't have much time left. Suddenly, Wong-yeon called out to Do-yeon, telling him to hurry and come see something. Do-yeon asked Wong-yeon if there was a monster or what, but Wong-yeon, trembling with fear, pointed outside toward a window, where there was a shadow of someone nearby. As Do-yeon focused his eyes a little more, his expression suddenly changed. What he saw there was his sister, Do-hyun, whom we saw earlier going to the nurse's office just moments before they all fell into the black hole. Flashback shows us from nowhere. We see Do-yeon and Do-hyun's mother punishing them for fighting with each other. The mother addressed Do-hyun, saying, "Kim Do-hyun, you are the older sister, so you have to yield sometimes to your younger brother." Do-hyun replied, saying she'd had enough because Do-yeon was far too greedy. The mother then addressed Do-yeon, "Kim Do-yeon, too, stop talking back to your sister. She's older than you." Young Do-yeon cried back, saying, "Mom, my sister is definitely a devil. Otherwise, there's no way she could be this mean." The mother gave up, realizing that talking to them wouldn't work. And as we've seen, Do-yeon often quarreled with his sister, even though his mother always told him that when they were little, he and his sister used to get along. But it seemed that Do-yeon only remembered the bad memories, and when they reached middle school and adolescence, they became closed off to one another, to the point where meeting on the street was awkward for them. Still, it was always Do-hyun who initiated contact, and that was something Do-yeon always felt. Back to the present time, when Do-yeon caught sight of his sister Do-hyun through the window, he let out a sigh of relief and whispered to himself, "What a relief! She's on the same floor I am, and the path is connected too. I can go rescue her." And the moment that thought crossed his mind, he rushed forward, but then suddenly stopped, as he thought to himself in worry, "I can't put everyone in danger again like I did during the first exploration." As soon as he thought this, he shouted to the others, "Sayana, I'll borrow your phone for a moment. You all have to return to the classroom first. As for me, I'll go get my sister, and then I'll catch up with you," Wong-yeon replied, showing clear concern. "Do-yeon, I understand how you feel, but time is tight. You won't have enough to save her and make it back to the classroom." Seon-ah also insisted, saying that if he was going to fetch his sister, then they would go with him, that it was better than splitting up. But Do-yeon answered with strict firmness, "Step back. No one is coming with me. I won't repeat myself twice. I don't want to relive the same nightmare we went through before. Not you, and not my sister. I'll see you later in the classroom." And with those words, he dashed off quickly toward his sister, while Seon-ah screamed his name, trying to stop him. At that moment, Seon-ah caught sight of Seo-jung leaving, so she asked her, "Seo-jung, where are you going?" Seo-jung answered coldly and indifferently, "To the classroom." And so the group split into three directions. Do-yeon, who rushed off to save his sister, Seo-jung, who decided to return to the classroom, and Seon-ah and Wong-yeon, who were left uncertain, not knowing what they should do. The scene then shifts to Do-yeon, standing in front of the nurse's office. He tried peeking through the window to check if he was taking the right path toward his sister. Then he thought to himself, "There aren't any other clear paths along the way. I think the nurse's office is the only entrance. Seeing this, he decided to take the risk and enter the nurse's office. But just in case, he knocked on the door first, respecting the rule. Knock before entering and visit quietly. And so, with only 25 minutes left before the end of the 8th exploration, our 4 groups are in complete turmoil and confusion. Group A had split up and were left in disarray. Group B were still inside the second-year classroom. Group C were still trapped in the classroom near the science monster. Group D continued their search in the hallways, though their fate remained unknown. After another memory surfaced in Do-yoon's mind, one of his mother, who had once asked him and his sister to get along and help each other, he decided to open the door, ignoring all the threats and looming fears, driven by his desire to save his beloved sister. As soon as he entered the nurse's office, he noticed that everything looked normal. Just like their own classroom section, the place hadn't been distorted like the hallways. But Do-yoon thought again about the rules that had to be followed inside the nurse's office. So, as a precaution, he grabbed a sharp scalpel and cut himself, using that as an excuse for being there. The rule stated that the nurse's office was a place where you could receive first aid only if you were sick or injured. Then Do-yoon's eyes fell on a broom placed in front of him. He grabbed it immediately to use it as a backup weapon if necessary, and then cautiously moved toward the curtains that concealed the patient's beds. He didn't rush to uncover what was behind them. Instead, he bent down first to make sure the area was empty by looking underneath. When he saw nothing suspicious, he slowly reached out his hand and pulled the curtain aside, only to find that the bed was empty. He then moved deeper into the room and realized that the scene was different from what he was used to. The entire place was surrounded by blue curtains, which struck him as completely unnatural. That's when he understood that the distortion had also reached the nurse's office, though it hadn't affected the area near the desk. When Do-yoon thought about it for a moment, he concluded that this was because students had been there at the time. That matched So-won's earlier words, which echoed in his mind at that moment. The degree of distortion depends on how close living beings are to that place. The distortion is weaker near them and grows stronger the farther away you go. And so Do-yoon found a logical explanation for what he was seeing before him. The front area still had the nurse and some students nearby, unlike the back area where the beds were located. While recalling the location of his sister in his mind, he realized that all he needed to do was walk along the edge without straying. So he carefully stepped toward the curtain in front of him and tried to pull it aside, but to his surprise, the curtain was as hard as a wall. He moved to check the curtain on the other side and found it solid as well. Then he went to the opposite side, and when he tried pushing the curtain there, it opened to reveal another room inside with an empty bed and blue curtains on all sides. Do-yoon entered the new room and began examining the curtains one by one. 2 of them were solid like walls, while one was a normal curtain next to the one he had entered through. Behind that normal curtain was yet another room with the same layout, an empty bed surrounded by blue curtains. Only then did Do-yoon realize the shocking truth. The place he was standing in was nothing more than a maze. Once Do-yoon confirmed this, he went back to the starting point and tried to break the wall, but it was extremely difficult and pointless. He also tried pulling the curtains completely open to avoid getting lost in the maze, but that didn't work either. He even tried folding them, but it was impossible. As a final attempt, he grabbed the scalpel he had taken earlier and tried to cut the curtains, but all that happened was the scalpel breaking in his hand. That's when Do-yoon understood that he had no choice but to go into the maze and make it through, that all attempts to cheat the system were useless. Then he took out his phone and checked the timer, realizing that he only had 15 minutes left. That wouldn't be enough to return to the classroom with his sister, since if the Korean language monster encountered them, their heads would surely fly. So Do-yoon began to think about what he should do. Should he go back to the classroom, continue the mission, and come back later to save his sister when he had more time? Of course, Do-yoon knew that wasn't a good option. There was no guarantee his sister would stay in the same place. She might move elsewhere, or even if she stayed put, would she still be safe? So Do-yoon rejected that option, realizing this might be his last chance to see his sister alive. That left only one option before him, to move forward and save her. What comforted him a little was knowing that the Korean language monster wouldn't attack them even if the break time ended, since monsters had a limited range according to what the class president had said earlier. With that thought, Do-yoon began his journey into the maze, but He didn't wander aimlessly. He used his phone to map out the maze as he went, so he wouldn't get lost inside it. He continued moving through the maze, exploring one room after another, while drawing his personal map. As time passed, tension began to creep into his heart. He hadn't found anything of value. Still, he forced himself to suppress those defeatist thoughts and pushed forward with his search. But every new room he entered was completely empty. His search was fruitless. After countless repetitions of the same pattern, despair began to settle in his chest. He had explored so many rooms by now without finding a single exit. Overwhelmed by mental pressure and exhaustion, his body couldn't take it anymore. He vomited, drowning in dark thoughts, bitterly telling himself that he had thought he still had a chance to save his sister. Unlike what had happened to his friend Ji-ho before, Do-yoon collapsed completely onto his knees, lost in his dark thoughts. But suddenly, the deadly silence around him broke. The sound of a curtain being pulled echoed before him. He slowly raised his head to see what was happening. The curtain was opening completely, unlike before, revealing a new room in front of him. At first, Do-yoon didn't understand what was happening, but then he realized that the rule of the nurse's office, the one that said the bed area could only be used by patients suffering from health issues like headaches or stomach aches, had been activated differently this time. Unlike before, when he had deliberately injured himself, this time Do-yoon had actually vomited, which meant he was truly sick, not faking it. So Do-yoon stood up again, picked up his broom from the ground, and began moving toward the room that had just opened before him. This was the first time a path had revealed itself to him, so hope returned to his heart. He knew this would be his last chance to save his sister. As Do-yoon moved forward, he noticed that behind the side curtains were walls, so he assumed that this path would likely lead him to the window area where he had seen his sister earlier. He also noticed something else strange as he advanced a bit further. He began to smell medicine, disinfectants, and another terrible, foul odor. Yet the room ahead looked just like the previous ones. A bed in the center surrounded by blue curtains on all sides. Do-yoon forced himself not to dwell on his thoughts and to focus instead on saving his sister as quickly as possible. So he stepped forward and pulled the curtain in front of him aside. But this time, a completely different room appeared before him, large, with many beds and bottles of disinfectant and bandages scattered on the floor. Do-yoon shone his light on one of the beds, and there he saw the corpse of a student wrapped entirely in bandages, just like a mummified body. The corpse's mouth was wide open, and the same was true for the others. On each bed lay a body with the exact same horrifying appearance. Do-yoon felt tense and thought he might vomit at any moment as he finally realized the source of the horrible stench he had smelled earlier. The dark thoughts wouldn't leave Do-yoon alone. As he stared at the corpses before him, he began to wonder if his sister was still alive, or if her body was among those mummified corpses. The idea of checking the bodies to make sure his sister wasn't one of them crossed his mind, but he decided not to do that to avoid thinking negatively and to focus instead on getting out of that dangerous place as quickly as possible. As Do-yoon turned to retreat, suddenly he heard a sound behind him. The shadow of someone appeared behind the curtain at the far end of the room. Without moving, Do-yoon glanced back and saw a terrifying scene of shadows shifting across the curtain. Someone who appeared to be a nurse was holding a pair of scissors and a bottle of disinfectant, while a student lay on the bed in front of her. The student was letting out muffled screams and faint groans. The nurse, or rather the monster, placed the disinfectant on the bed, then picked up a stethoscope and began searching for the student's heartbeat. After that, she grabbed the scissors and opened the student's chest amid his desperate screams, then poured disinfectant onto the open wound. Seeing this scene, Do-yoon was completely shocked. Instinctively, he slowly turned around and began to move, carefully avoiding the bottles to prevent making any noise. But suddenly, something happened that startled Do-yoon. Fortunately, the nurse monster didn't hear him, as she was still busy wrapping the student in bandages. Do-yoon sighed in relief at the sight, but that relief didn't last long, because his phone suddenly rang loudly, announcing the end of the break period. The nurse monster immediately noticed. She stopped what she was doing, grabbed her scissors, and started walking toward the curtain to open it. But unexpectedly, a hand grabbed Do-yoon and pulled him into hiding. The nurse monster peeked through to see what was going on, but she found nothing suspicious. Do-yoon turned to see who had pulled him, and to his surprise, it was his sister, the one he had been searching for. Upon seeing each other and finally being reunited, Both of them broke down in tears. Of course, Do-yoon had many questions. What had happened to her while he was gone? How did she end up here? Was she injured anywhere? He had so much to ask, but at least he felt relief knowing that his sister was alive and not dead. More important than all those questions, though, was finding a way to escape the monster before them. Do-yoon began to think to himself, I was so startled by the bell earlier that I didn't have time to think. But now we're during class hours and we're still outside the classroom. Yet the Korean language monster hasn't appeared to attack us. That confirms the class president's theory was right. With that realization, Do-yoon understood that his only real problem now was the monster in front of him. Suddenly, his sister whispered, snapping him out of his thoughts, asking him why he had come here. Do-yoon turned toward her and saw that she was still crying. At that same moment, the nurse monster was still searching for the source of the sound she had heard earlier. Then suddenly she noticed footprints mixed with disinfectant leading toward the curtain. Back to Do-yoon's sister, she was still crying as she asked her brother why he had come to this place too. Do-yoon didn't understand her question, so he replied, "What are you talking about? I'm here for you. And don't worry when it comes to the way back. I have a map." Suddenly, Do-yoon heard something moving toward them, and of course, it was the nurse monster nearby behind the curtain, preparing to attack. But when she entered, she found nothing, since Do-yoon and his sister had hurried into the next room, the one filled with multiple beds. The nurse monster didn't stop searching. She went back to check the large room again, but Do-yoon and his sister quickly hid behind a bed. When the monster saw nothing suspicious, she returned to the other side of the wide room to make sure everything was clear. But Do-yoon and his sister also rushed to hide farther away from her. However, as Do-yoon was running, he slipped on the spilled hand sanitizer and fell to the floor. The nurse monster heard the sound and hurried to look, and there she saw Do-yoon lying on the ground. Do-yoon quickly got up, and he and his sister began running away from the monster, who started chasing them through the maze. Since Do-yoon had memorized the path, he led the way to help them escape and return. But suddenly, when he entered a certain room and tried to pull aside the curtain, it wouldn't move. It wasn't a curtain anymore, but a solid wall. Do-yoon screamed in despair, shouting, "What? This can't be right. This was the path I took before." Hearing this, Do-yoon's sister replied, "When you entered, it was a curtain, not a wall, right? Just as I thought, not only here, but all the paths connecting the dark and light areas have turned into walls. Entering this place is like stepping into a trap you can't escape from." Do-yoon then said to his sister, "You've been here for a long time, and you knew that the path I was taking was a dead end. So why didn't you stop me?" His sister answered, "That monster, once it finds its prey, it never lets it go. Someone has to get on the operating table for the chase to stop." Do-yoon spoke tensely. "I don't know what you're trying to say, but every monster here follows a certain rule. If we can figure out that rule, the rule from which this monster's distortion came, we can escape and get away safely. It's too early to give up, so let's find that rule." Hearing that, Do-yoon's sister smiled faintly and said, "I guess you've been through a lot too. Well, I've learned quite a few things about this place myself. For example, when the monster catches someone and starts wrapping them in bandages, it takes a long time before it reaches the operating table." Do-yoon's sister clenched her fists anxiously and continued, "So you have to escape during that time. Don't let it catch you again." Do-yoon understood what his sister was implying, and he shouted at her, "What the hell are you saying? Listen to me. I told you it's too early to give up. We still have a chance to survive." His sister turned toward him, crying, and told him to keep living to survive, just as the monster suddenly tore open the curtain and lunged to attack her. Seeing this, Do-yoon's memories began to flash before his eyes once again. He realized that his beloved sister was about to sacrifice herself for his survival. But suddenly, something struck the monster's head hard, knocking the scissors from its hand and stopping it from killing Do-yoon's sister. What hit it was a guitar specifically, the fat Woongyeon's guitar, as he shouted, "The new version of Woongyeon has arrived." We also see Seon-ah appearing alongside him, saying, "I've been looking for you for so long, Kim Do-yoon." Then the scene cuts back to the second-year classroom, where class representative Shim Yoo-jin told the students everything that had happened and all the information they had gathered. Afterward, the class president asked her, "You said you're not even sure this place is safe, right? Why did you say that?" Shim Yoo-jin smiled and said, I almost forgot the most important part of the story." Then Shim Yoo-jin stood up and ordered the others to follow her, saying it would be better if they saw it for themselves instead of her just telling them. We return to Woong-yeon, who saved Do-yoon's sister by striking the monster with his guitar. He greeted Do-yoon and then suddenly began to vomit. Suddenly, Do-hee noticed the curtain opening, but then it began to close. At the same moment, Do-yoon noticed it and shouted at his classmates to hurry and take cover from the monster. But the monster was already behind Do-hee, trying to wrap her in bandages. Do-hee avoided that. Do-yoon grabbed the curtain that was slowly closing and used all his strength to keep it open. He shouted at his classmates to get inside quickly before the curtain shut. Do-hee, lying on the ground, saw the monster behind her, holding bandages. That sight made her remember what had happened to their classmates, the monster's torture and the killings. After recalling that, she pulled a pair of scissors from her pocket and stabbed them into the monster nurse's leg, but the latter kicked Do-hee and sent her flying. Meanwhile, Woong-yeon raised his guitar and struck the monster's head, causing its mask to fall off and revealing its terrifying face to Woong-yeon, who froze in horror. As they fled, the monster grabbed Woong-yeon's guitar case with its bandages and chased him, attempting to stab him with the scissors. Do-yoon shoved a bed so that it collided with the monster and pushed it away from Woong-yeon, keeping it at bay until he pressed it against the wall. Then he shouted to his classmates to run. Everyone sprinted toward the curtain that was slowly closing and managed to get inside. The monster began running after them to catch up, but the curtain closed on it and prevented it from entering, leaving only the hand that held the scissors stuck outside. After that, the nurse monster stopped chasing them, or so they thought. At the time, after what happened, they realized that the nurse monster was part of the maze and could not control the opening and closing of the doors. As for what had happened earlier with Woong-yeon, Seo-na, and the chubby Soo-yo-jung, Seo-na had threatened Soo-yo-jung, telling her she wouldn't know the way back because the map was with Seo-na. They convinced Soo-yo-jung, then chased after Do-yoon to the nurse's office. There, they discovered the nature of the maze. Soo-yo-jung refused to go inside, while Seo-na and Woong-yeon decided to risk it and search for Do-yoon. During this, Woong-yeon became ill and felt like vomiting so much, so that he actually threw up. Surprisingly, right after that, a curtain opened before them. Thanks to Seo-na's quick thinking, she realized this wasn't a coincidence. So they entered and then found Do-yoon and his sister. It was Seo-na who spoke to Do-yoon, saying, "I know you went alone because you were worried about us. But you should have stopped to think about how worried that might make us. Even if you're heading toward danger, bring us with you and let us do it together. Everyone depends on you." Do-yoon sank into thought and said, "I figured that depending on no one was the best way, so I wouldn't be a burden. But I was wrong. If it weren't for Woong-yeon and Seo-na, my sister and I wouldn't be here now. Was there a part of me worried about my friends? Or did I just consider them a heavy burden?" Hearing what Seo-na said made me ashamed of myself. So Do-yoon apologized to them, while Woong-yeon smiled and removed the last curtain so they could return to the nurse's office. What lay before them, however, was a terrifying sight. The room had been completely distorted, radiating intense heat. The floor was warped, the door too, the walls, everything. Do-yoon's face registered shock at the sight. We returned to Shim Yujin, who led the group to show them through the window why she had said they weren't sure the classroom was safe. What was outside was different from what they'd seen before. Giant walls were now there, constantly moving and producing a terrifying sound. The entire school was shifting. This explained why groups had earlier seen warped floors and walls and felt the heat emanating from it. We go back to Classroom 4, the first-year students' room, where Group D has returned, but they found no one. The classroom was empty. Seeing this, Soo-yeon headed for the door to leave the classroom, but the purple-haired student stopped her, telling her the bell was about to ring. Soo-yeon didn't respond. She told him she'd be back in a moment. Young-jun then began to hear violent shaking the floor, and everything else trembled as if an earthquake were happening, to the point that desks and chairs toppled to the ground. The purple-haired student stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. Next, we see Group C inside Classroom 1, where they were preparing to leave at the ring of the next break bell. While Miji began apologizing to her classmates for dragging them into all this, the ground began to shake, Desks fell and strong winds blew through the windows. Miji covered her ears at the deafening noise and shouted, "What now? I can't take any more of this nonsense." Ji-woon rushed to the window and saw the buildings shifting and colliding with one another. She realized that was the cause of the tremors and prayed that all her classmates were safe. We moved to Soo-yeon, who stepped outside to assess the situation while remembering memories with her previous group. Suddenly, as she turned to look down the hallway that Group A always used, she found that the corridor was no longer as wide as before. It too was warped, distorted, and had become narrow. Soo-yeon was shocked and collapsed to the floor at what she saw. Back to Group A, they found the exit of the nurse's office distorted due to the buildings moving and slamming into each other. Old version Woon-gyeon merged with his newer self, his eyes filled with tears from fear, but he tried to stay optimistic and said there might be another exit. Do-hee, Do-yoon's sister, crushed his hopes, saying there was no other exit. She had searched everywhere before and hadn't found one. Do-yoon asked Seon-ah, did you notice anything strange when you first came here? Seon-ah replied that she hadn't noticed anything odd, then suddenly remembered something and said, "Oh, actually, I think I felt a strange vibration while we were exploring the maze." Do-yoon deduced that maybe not much time had passed since that had happened. Suddenly, his thoughts were cut off by a voice from behind him. "This is all your fault." It was Soo-yeon speaking. She had been hiding behind the desk. Do-yoon tried to reassure her, but she pulled out a scalpel and raised it toward him, then angrily said, "Bastard, if only we hadn't come here. We wouldn't be in all this hell. Look at this chaos. It's all because of you, you damn, because you decided to go to the nurse's office. So how are you going to take responsibility now?" Seon-ah interrupted Soo-yeon to calm her, but the chubby Soo-yeon kept shouting angrily, "What do you think you're doing? Get out of my way." "Oh, that's right. You're the one who threatened me into coming here, aren't you? I will never forgive you. I'll never forgive you as long as I live." Soo-yeon then lunged to attack Seon-ah in front of a stunned Do-yoon, but she suddenly stopped and began crying hysterically. Do-yoon and Seon-ah were surprised. Seon-ah approached the sobbing Soo-yeon and lamented her fate. She took Soo-yeon's hand and apologized, saying, "I'm really sorry, Soo-yeon. I was just worried that going alone would be dangerous for you. I won't do that again." Afterward, we see the scene of the maze, which had also begun to distort due to the tremors. The rooms started warping, and because of that, the solid curtains became partially open. Thus, the monster found its way to chase after our friends inside the nurse's room. As the maze continued to deform, the group began to feel strong vibrations. The frightened Woon-gyeon asked his friends what they should do, while Do-yoon began thinking to himself that they needed to move faster, or else they would be crushed to death as the walls continued to twist and collapse. Do-yoon quickly started searching for another way to escape from the nurse's office. Suddenly, he noticed a window and looked through it to see another nearby window, but he knew it was impossible for them to cross from one window to another. Then, suddenly, his eyes shifted downward and he noticed that there was a floor below, this time unlike before, when there had only been an endless abyss. Do-yoon picked up a pillow and dropped it downward to check if the ground was safe. When he saw the pillow land intact, he realized that the ground was solid enough to walk on. Thus, Do-yoon thought to himself that it was worth the attempt. The height was about 4 floors. With that plan in mind, Do-yoon ordered his friends to bring him as many blankets and pillows from the maze as they could find. The 3 of them stood there, confused about what Do-yoon was planning. After he explained his idea, which was to make a long rope by tying the blankets together, Woon-gyeon asked, "But isn't that dangerous? What if the blankets come apart while we're climbing down?" Do-yoon answered that he had once seen a video explaining that tightly tied knots wouldn't come undone, even if pulled by a truck. Then he continued, saying, "Ever since then, I've been interested in different kinds of knots and learned how to make a few." Hearing that, Do-yoon instructed Woon-gyeon to stay and help him make the knots while the others went to collect blankets. And so the plan to make a rope of blankets began. Seon-ah, Do-yoon's sister, and Soo-yeon continued bringing blankets and pillows, crying as they worked, while Do-yoon and Woon-gyeon tied them together, rolling the blankets and securing them tightly to make them suitable for knotting. Then they tied each blanket to the next, using a knot called the double fisherman's knot. As for the pillows, Do-yoon threw them down beforehand to help cushion their fall in case of an accident. After several minutes of connecting the blankets, Do-yoon decided to test whether the rope would reach the ground and if its length was sufficient. He tied the rope to the radiator, broke the window using Woong-gyeon's guitar, and threw the rope down. It was long enough it reached the ground. Si-an-ah then approached Do-yoon nervously and told him that Soo-yo-jung hadn't returned from fetching more blankets. It didn't make sense because she had taken a photo of the map, which should have made finding her way back easy. As Si-an-ah spoke, the vibrations started again, warning them that their time was almost up. Upon hearing that, Do-yoon told the others they all needed to go search for Soo-yo-jung together, so they could find her quickly. But unexpectedly, Woong-gyeon stopped Do-yoon, saying, "No, we won't all go. I'll go alone. Time is short if we all leave. We won't have enough time to climb down one after another once we find her. So use the time I'm searching for Soo-yo-jung to start descending one by one. That way we'll save time." Do-yoon hesitated to agree, but Woong-gyeon continued, "Even though I may look like this, my eyesight is still good. You don't have to worry about me getting lost. Leave finding Soo-yo-jung to me, you guys start climbing down." Hearing this, Do-yoon decided to follow Woong-gyeon's plan and trust him. And so, Woong-gyeon said goodbye to his friends, telling them they would meet downstairs in a few moments. We can see that Woong-gyeon's personality had changed. For the better, he had become braver than before, ever since he promised Do-yoon he would change and stop being a coward. But even so, Do-yoon felt uneasy. He couldn't help but feel a bit of sorrow for his friend. After that, Do-yoon ordered the others to head down the rope, leading the way himself as the first to descend. As soon as he climbed through the window, fear began to creep into his heart. He realized the height was greater than he had imagined. But even so, Do-yoon grabbed the rope and decided to trust the knots they had made. He began lowering himself slowly while the two girls watched him nervously. Do-yoon used his hands to grip the rope tightly and his feet to help control his descent. After a while, Si-an-ah leaned out the window to check on him, and he called up that he had reached the ground safely. Si-an-ah and Do-yoon's sister both sighed in relief, while he shouted up for them not to come down yet until he made sure the area below was safe. Si-an-ah agreed and told him that while he was checking below, she would go look for Woong-gyeon and Soo-yo-jung for 5 minutes. Do-yoon told her to hurry and not take too long. They didn't know when the walls would collapse or the distortion would reach them. Si-an-ah left, telling Do-hee, Do-yoon's sister, that she was going to search for Woong-gyeon. Do-hee told her she would go too, because she didn't want to just sit and do nothing. The scene then shifts to the maze, where we see Woong-gyeon standing in a room. Looking nervous, he hadn't found Soo-yo-jung, despite his thorough search. Losing hope, he began shouting her name, hoping she could hear him. Suddenly, Woong-gyeon heard a sound that made him jump in fear. He turned toward the source and asked, "Soo-yo-jung, is that you?" Then suddenly, Soo-yo-jung's hand appeared from behind a curtain, making Woong-gyeon jump in shock. He slowly approached the hand and said, "Soo-yo-jung, what are you doing? We've finished making the rope. Stop stalling, let's go back quickly." Suddenly, as Woong-gyeon spoke, the hand began slowly pulling back behind the curtain. Woong-gyeon grew terrified, telling Soo-yo-jung not to mess with him like that, and pulled the curtain aside to enter. What he found inside was beyond his imagination. Soo-yo-jung's corpse, brutally killed, a pair of scissors stabbed into her head, while the monster held her by the arms, forcing her upright. Woong-gyeon raised his eyes slightly and saw something even more horrifying than Soo-yo-jung's corpse. The nurse monster smiling, with an iron rod impaled through the back of its head and exiting through one of its eyes. We return to Si-an-ah, who was also searching, calling out for Woong-gyeon and Soo-yo-jung while checking the time on her phone. The 5 minutes had passed and she hadn't found either of them. Suddenly, Si-an-ah spotted Do-hee sitting and groaning in pain. She rushed over to check on her. Do-hee, trembling from pain, told Si-an-ah to wait a little until the pain subsided. After a few moments, she stopped shaking and reassured Si-an-ah that she was fine, then stood up again. But suddenly, Do-hee's expression changed fear, and panic spread across her face, and she screamed, "I can smell it again!" The mix of disinfectant and blood. That disgusting smell only comes from that monster. Si-an-ah asked Do-hee if that monster was the only one in the maze, and Do-hee replied yes. Si-an-ah then asked again, "So in that dark area belonging to the monster, You can't get out of there on your own, though he answered that a person couldn't enter or leave that place unless they were sick, like vomiting or feeling a headache near that area, though he continued, asking Seona if Suyojung was the type of reckless person who would dare to go that deep into the maze to reach that dark area. Knowing Suyojung's personality, Seona answered that she wouldn't do that. Hearing Seona's answer, Do-hee urged her to return to the nurse's office, saying, then if Suyojung wouldn't go that far, everything should be fine. After that, the two of them left, though Seona still carried a trace of doubt in her heart. We returned to Woon Gyeon, who was staring at the monster in disbelief, thinking to himself that it was impossible for the monster to be in this area, because earlier it had been blocked by the wall and got stuck, and the monster couldn't control the opening and closing of the walls. According to the map, Suyojung hadn't gone very deep into the maze. She was only 3 rooms away. But as is well known, plans often don't go perfectly as intended because something unexpected always happens. That unexpected thing was the warping and distortion of the maze rooms to the point that the walls which had blocked the monster broke, allowing it to move freely inside the maze. While everyone was bringing blankets and making the rope, they took around 20 minutes. And that was enough time for the monster to get close to the exit, where it found Suyojung still gathering blankets. And so, because of an unforeseen variable, Suyojung died. Despite all this, there had been a chance for Suyojung to survive. If she had paid attention to her classmates, what they were wearing, and every possible detail, she might have stayed alive. The nurse monster was wearing high heels, and her classmates were wearing slippers. So when she heard the sound of heels behind her earlier, she should have run, because her classmates were in slippers. But that tiny detail was hard for Suyojung to notice, and that was because she didn't care enough about her classmates. When the monster saw Woon-gyeon, it lunged at him and grabbed his head tightly while he struggled in despair, pulling himself backward. As soon as he got out of the room, the nurse monster noticed the scissors in Suyojung's head, released Woon-gyeon's head, and rushed to grab the scissors, then moved to attack Woon-gyeon. But he vanished from before her eyes without a trace. He had bolted toward the exit. Seeing this, the monster decided to wrap Suyojung first, so it laid her on the bed and began its work. While the monster was wrapping Suyojung, Woon-gyeon hurried toward the nurse's hall. The place had become even more distorted than before, and the heat was extremely intense. Woon-gyeon endured the heat and moved slowly until he reached the hall, where he found no one, only the rope stretched out through the window. Seeing this, Woon-gyeon cried tears of relief because everyone had gone down safely. He rushed to close his guitar case, but suddenly he heard the sound of heels approaching, so he ran to the window and began descending with the rope. Do-yoon spotted this and shouted for him to hurry, breathing a sigh of relief. He then asked if he had found Suyojung. Hearing that, Woon-gyeon's foot slipped and he nearly fell. Do-yoon told him to slow down, but Woon-gyeon told him the monster was following him, and as for Suyojung, she was dead, because the wall that had blocked the monster had been opened. Do-yoon was shocked and quickly asked, "Didn't you see my sister and Seona up there?" Upon hearing this, it was Woon-gyeon's turn to be shocked. He screamed in terror, "What are you talking about? Haven't they come down yet?" Seeing all this, a disturbing, terrifying feeling crept into Do-yoon. He remembered Suyojung's words as she blamed him, telling him he was the reason for everything that was happening, and that he had to take responsibility. Suddenly, Do-yoon's thoughts were cut off by the monster's footsteps coming from the window. Woon-gyeon looked up, and there was the monster peering from the window, holding its scissors, trying to cut the rope. Seeing this, Woon-gyeon was terrified and knew a dreadful fate awaited him. The distance between him and the ground was very great, so he began to speak as if leaving his final message to his friend. "Man, I haven't done anything good so far. Kim Do-yoon, it's been so much fun being with you." Hearing his friend's words, Do-yoon rushed toward him, but it was already too late. The monster cut the rope, and Woon-gyeon began plummeting toward the ground before Do-yoon's disbelieving eyes. With the sound of the heavy impact, mixed with Do-yoon's piercing scream, Woon-gyeon hit the ground. Without a doubt, Woon-gyeon died from the force of the fall. Do-yoon rushed to him, shaking him and calling out, denying the reality of his friend's death. Seeing the blood flowing from Woon-gyeon's mouth, Do-yoon finally knew his friend had passed away. When the monster saw Do-yoon down below, it tried to jump down to him, but it couldn't get through the window, as if an invisible wall were blocking it. So it retreated and left. Hearing the sound of the monster's heels as it left, Do-yoon raised his head to look up at the window, his face filled with tears and despair. His sister and Seona were still up there. The floor with the nurse's room exploded, and with it exploded Do-yoon's rage and despair. He suddenly lost all hope. After a scream of anguish, he went quiet, but a falling brick struck the back of his head and knocked him unconscious beside his dead friend. After that, we see members of the other groups trying to escape all those violent tremors. The class president's group and the second-year students tried to find any path to escape, but the only route was through the gymnasium, which had also become distorted and warped. The same was true for So-won's group. They tried to return to their previous classroom, but the way back had also become warped and twisted. So-won spoke to his two companions, saying, "I don't think we can return to our classroom anymore, but we can try to find another way if you're insistent. Still, we shouldn't make such a stupid decision just because you want to look for friends, right?" Do-yoon didn't say anything, but So-won understood the meaning of the expression on her face, so he continued, "Even if we don't search for them, there's a chance we'll meet them later. After all, we share the same destination. And of course, the destination is below, deep inside the black hole." The class president had the same perspective as So-won. He preferred to hurry and find a path for them rather than waste time returning to the classroom, which would be extremely difficult, especially now that he knew their time was limited because the buildings were colliding with each other. It seems the president's personality had changed, and that's to be expected. Selfishness is the key to survival. Without it, he would already be dead. Thus, for both So-won and the class president, finding the exit at the bottom of the black hole had become the top priority. Everything else was just unnecessary baggage. But of course, not everyone agreed with them completely. Do-yoon decided that they would, of course, go down, but at the same time they would search for their friends. The class president decided to head downward without wasting time. Despite Tae-hoon's hesitation, he joined the class president, who went to Shim Yoo-jin and told her that the exit from this hell lay at the bottom of the hole. Hearing this, she was shocked by the information. The class president continued, "I'll tell you everything I know, so please help us, so we can go down and find the exit." Naturally, Shim Yoo-jin was pleased by the amount of information the class president had, so she shook his hand in agreement. And so the map drawing plan failed, and the four groups split up without any of them knowing the condition of the others. Each group began moving toward an escape route with its own strength and its own plan. But it seems Group D still held on to the original plan. They decided to keep searching for a new classroom and other students, but this time without returning to their old classroom. They packed all their belongings and prepared for this dangerous journey. And so we reach the end of the first season of our story. 2 days had passed inside the black hole, 2 days of terrifying, shocking events, 2 days of facing death and losing loved ones. But outside the black hole, in the real world, only 16 minutes had passed. While the students' parents gathered and looked upon the horrifying scene, their children were living the worst days of their lives as they tried to return. So, will our heroes really be able to make it back? Or are greater horrors coming even worse than what they've endured during this time? Thank you so much for watching until the end of the first season. We'll be back with the second season as soon as the writer begins working on it. If you enjoyed the story and want to follow more, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. We'd like to inform you that the story is still ongoing, and the author has announced that Season 2 is coming soon. We also remind you that the original chapters are not free and are first published in Korean, which caused a slight delay in our translation, so please don't forget to support us. Thank you so much for your patience and constant support.